Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I hope we're all in good health. I'm going to go straight into it, so I'll introduce you to the chaplain, which is David Ruddick, and he shall offer prayers now. Thank you very much.
Very good evening, everybody. I'd like to read the next two verses from Psalm 8, if I may. It's a psalm addressed to God. Here they are, verses 3 and 4. When I look at your heavens, the work of your fingers, the moon and the stars that you have established, what are human beings that you are mindful of them, mortals that you care for them? Yet you have made them a little lower than the angels and crowned them with glory and honor. So what is our place in this world? The answer in the Bible is a glorious answer. We are one part of God's creation, but we are wonderfully privileged as human beings. We have the distinction of being crowned with glory and honor by the God who flung stars into space. We might look up at the passing of the clouds day by day, especially during lockdown, and wonder where we fit into the narrative of this world, if there is such a thing. Well, the answer given here is a glorious one, that there is a God who has bestowed a dignity upon every human being in the borough of Merton because he cares for them. Every human life is precious. So I'll pray for the meeting right now with that in mind. Let's pray. Father God, in your sight, all human lives are of very great worth. And we pray for those involved in this council meeting this evening, with great thanks for their commitment to debating and making decisions that impact the lives of those in our borough. No doubt there are hard decisions to be made in these challenging times, not least with the budget this evening. So thank you for putting these men and women whom you have honoured on the council to make those decisions. Please give them wisdom. And as we consider the work of your fingers, we know ourselves to be very small next to you and undeserving of your grace. But thank you that the witness of your Bible is that Jesus Christ became small and became our brother in order to raise us up to your throne. And we ask this prayer in his name. Amen.
Welcome to the virtual meeting of the Council. Members, when you make a speech, the clerk will let you know when you have 1 minute left, and again when your time is up. You will be operating your own microphones. If you wish to speak and your name is not on my list, please alert the clerk or the chief executive via the chat function. We are managing a large number of members in this Zoom meeting, so please be patient. If you experience any technical difficulties, please alert a member of the Democratic Services via the chat function. Are there any apologies for absence? Councillor Christie?
Yes, Madam Mayor, I've got apologies from Councillor Attawar, who's recovering from an operation, and also Councillor Irons is on maternity leave.
Councillor Ormerod?
Yeah, we have full attendance tonight, Madam Mayor.
Councillor McGrath?
Full attendance tonight, Madam.
Councillor Southgate?
All present, Madam Mayor.
Are there any declarations of pecuniary interest? Are the minutes agreed as a, sorry, did someone speak? Are the minutes agreed as a correct record?
Madam Mayor.
Yes, Councillor Macon.
On page 1, minutes of previous meetings, it should say Sheila Draper instead of Sally Draper.
Thank you for that, Russell. I didn't notice it. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Could you just, page 1, it should be Sheila Draper and it's got Sally Draper.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much, Councillor Meakin, for noticing that. Thank you.
4.
We will now deal with the only item for tonight, the business plan 2021 to 25, I will briefly outline how I intend to proceed so all councillors and members of the public watching on YouTube will understand the procedure for this meeting. Firstly, the council will receive a presentation from the Director of Corporate Service on the business report. Once the Director of Corporate Services has finished, I will invite councillors to ask her questions about the report, as indicated to the group leaders previously. I will be following the order as used for the members' questions as at ordinary council meetings. I have allocated 20 minutes for this item, which should allow the expected 12 questions across the groups to be asked, and I will ensure that there is time for all those to be asked. However, if time should allow, I will happily take any further questions to the Director based on other names provided and will rotate as before. The next part of the meeting will be the speeches by the 4 group leaders, starting with the Leader of the Council, Councillor Allison, moving the substantive budget report. I will then invite members of the Cabinet to comment on the report before us. We will then take any amendments on the budget report. Once the amendments have been moved and seconded and are on the table, I will open up the meeting to the main debate. I will invite members to speak in turn based on the order provided by each group in a rotating fashion between each group. At the conclusion of the main debate, I will then take each of the amendments and call for a vote on each individually. Once all the amendments have been agreed or fallen, I will then invite the leader to move the substantive report to be voted upon. Finally, just a reminder that all votes this evening will be taken via roll call in line with the Council's constitution. I would like to invite the Director of Corporate Services to address the meeting.
Good evening. I present to you tonight the budget for 2021-22 and the business plan for 2021-25. There's a wealth of information in the papers, not forgetting the information pack, which you've not had to carry around to Cabinet, scrutiny meetings and this council meetings for this year. Last year, I talked about how the fog of Brexit had descended into a pea souper, with all of the internal and external challenges to the MTFS. Never did anyone anticipate the challenges that COVID-19 would bring to our residents, their families, our staff and services, our businesses and the community. Our thoughts go out to those who lost their lives and their friends and families. There has been a great deal of debate about the cost of COVID in the current year and the level of support from central government to support our services and loss of income. And that's before our other functions and responsibilities have been given to us, funded by direct grant. The amount of support has increased over the year, but is not currently sufficient to offset the additional costs, shortfall in savings, or income loss through commercial endeavours, sales fees and charges, and council tax and business rates. What is more difficult to determine is the impact over the MTFS of COVID. Whilst we now have the path out of lockdown, the impact on residents, services and businesses is still unclear. We now have some of our residents suffering from long COVID who need our support. There will be additional impact on homelessness and rough sleeping when the ban on eviction ends at the end of this month, unless it is extended further. As our schools open their doors to all pupils, as most have been open for vulnerable children and those of key workers, it is anticipated that there will be an increase in referrals to children's care teams, requiring both more support and staff to respond to these. All the time whilst the courts are closed, this has a further impact on children's social workers not being able to progress or close cases and achieve the best outcomes for our children. There has been an announcement today about the extension of the furlough scheme until the end of September, which will be of great help to our residents, as 30.8% of those in employment are currently furloughed. There's been an increase of over 9% in the number of working age residents that we are continuing to support through our council tax support scheme, and this number is expected to increase further over the coming year, at an increasing cost for the first time since we have implemented our own scheme. The announcement of further release of businesses for the first 3 months of the year is welcomed, as within the papers tonight we show the deficit on the collection fund for business rates is 5.7 million, and that is before we allow for any increase in appeals as a result of COVID. Work is ongoing across London to demonstrate what impact this might have, and if a further direction to spread the deficit for 21-22 might be required. It will not be clear until later on in this year what businesses have been able to survive on our high streets, and therefore what the impact on our town centres will be. Our sales fees and charges have also been impacted, but the extension of a further 3-month support is welcomed. Other complexities in the MTFS is the outcome of Brexit. We have had over 37,000 EU residents in Merton successfully confirm either their settled or pre-settled status, which is really good news. But there is still some way to go to ensure that no one gets left behind and becomes a potential no recourse to public fund issue and no rights. There are some also anomalies that are becoming clearer as we and local businesses work through the extensive agreement. COVID has also impacted on the workings of central government. This has meant that the 4-year spending review and fair funding review has been deferred again. We got another 1-year settlement, mainly what finance colleagues have referred to as a rollover plus. This has helped for 21-22, particularly with some additional COVID support, but not for the medium term. It does not allow for realistic planning when we do not know the size of the cake that all local authorities will have, let alone our share of it. In the interim, I, as a Section 151 officer, have to satisfy myself and you that the budgets are robust and reserves are adequate. I take a prudent, long-term approach, as there has been talk of levelling up funding to other parts of the country. Of the 4.8 billion for local infrastructure announced today, we need to see how London can bid for what it still needs when past decisions have shown a particular negative impact for London. There is also the business rates retention scheme. The reforms, which were originally in 2021 to go to 100%, have now been delayed until the autumn. But a much bigger question is now the sustainability of business rates as a funding source for local authorities. Due to the effects of COVID, the business rate pool for London has been discontinued for 21-22, so Merton will not benefit from any upside or be accountable for any contributions towards other London authorities if they go below their safety net funding level. It will still be a 67% scheme. 30% of our rates will go to the GLA, 33% to central government, and 30% London boroughs. We still do not have the outcome of the 2018-19 business rates pool, let alone 19-20, due to delays for some authorities in getting their accounts audited. The Green Paper on social care has been delayed from September 2017, with no proposed publication date, but still remains a manifesto commitment. We do have the Health and Social Care White Paper on integration and innovation, and we look forward to working with our health colleagues on what this means for our community. In light of no Green Paper in the MTFS, we have assumed that the social care grants continue over the next few years, but this may not be the case. Then we come on to the issue of the funding of the DSG deficit going forward. Our recovery plan, or non-recovery plan, now with a worst case scenario of 117 million deficit by the end of 24-25, assumes certain level of grant continuing and the impact of measures to expand our special schools to reduce the percentage of places in independent schools. This has been a growing issue across the country, and the deficits are beginning to be material in terms of the accounts and are now exercising external auditors. Whilst the response from the DfE is welcome, having a 3-year statutory override, this does not resolve the issue. It is how the government expects councils and schools to fund the shortfalls at the end of this period and whether they will increase funding in this area. In the interim, there is a real risk that the deficit will exceed our general reserves provision, materially impacting on the council's financial viability and our value for money conclusion, even with our reserve to offset this in the short term alongside potential qualification of the accounts. Within the papers in front of you tonight are revised corporate indicators, highlighting what we see as important for the Council as a whole to monitor. It has a revised risk management strategy, where our approach is informed and cautious, but we do recognise that a high level of risk may be needed to be accepted to support innovation. The procurement strategy sets out major procurement exercises for next year, including our school meals contract and a combined heat and power plant for the Civic Centre. The papers do also set out how the position has changed from those presented to you last March. So officers have been working on proposals for the medium-term financial strategy from 2018-19, alongside cabinet members and scrutiny panels. Many scrutiny panels this year due to the late availability of data to enable you to help shape the services for our residents and visitors, to deliver the services they need, they value, the ones they complain about, the ones they don't realise that we provide. Certainly that has been the case during the course of this year, and new ones that the central government has realised that we can provide in a better way. There's also some services they clearly don't want, but we choose to do so or have a legal responsibility to provide. In considering the budget for 21-22 and the possible reduction or alteration of service provisions, members must consider the Public Sector Equality Duty under Section 149 of the Equality Act 2010. The Council must, when exercising its functions, have due regard to the need to eliminate discrimination, harassment, victimisation, and other conduct prohibited by the Equality Act, and to advance equality of opportunity and foster good relations between those who share a protected characteristic under the Act and those who do not. The proposed savings contained in the material for Cabinet will be subject to separate decision makings, either by Council, Cabinet, or members or officers. Some of the proposed savings will require a consultation process to be undertaken, and the product of consultation must be conscientiously taken into account in finalising any decisions. If, as a result of the consultation process, there are changes to proposed savings, alternative arrangements will need to be made to deliver reductions in spend. The proposals contained in the budget report tonight are not fixed or rigid decisions to impose specific reductions in spending. The budget decision is not the final decision affecting the provision of an element of a service, and individual savings proposals are not set in stone. A detailed assessment of the impact of saving proposals will be undertaken if required when specific policies have been formulated. We have a balanced budget for 21-22, a gap in 22-23 rising to 24-25 to over 14 million, subject to the impact of long COVID. Future increases in council tax at the maximum level have currently allowed have been built in to reduce the gap to these levels. We have again been able to utilise the balance in the budget reserve to smooth the impact on the bottom line over the short and medium term, but this is now estimated to be fully utilised in 22-23. Our capital programme sets out the necessary long-term investment in our assets up to 2030, helping us to respond to those demographic changes referred to earlier, expanding secondary schools, special schools, regenerating our town centres. Linked to this, Treasury Management Strategy, which shows our approach to borrowing and financing the capital programme. The use of reserves and balances has been set out and show their use over time, both on a revenue and capital basis, complicated by the DSG deficit and spending review reserve offset. I have reviewed the level of general fund balances and set out in the revised information in the report and review further in light of our overall outturn position. So I look to balance with my CMT colleagues, the strategic direction for members, the needs of residents, impact on services, impact on balances, levels of council tax and gaps going forward over the short, medium and long term. I'm your Section 151 officer with overall responsibility for presenting to you to approve a business plan, a medium-term financial strategy and a balanced budget for 21-22, a proposed adult social care precept of 3%, and a 1.99% increase in the core element of council tax. These stem mainly from legislation enacted from 1972 onwards, but there is older case law in 1906, which states that I also have responsibility to local taxpayers. Therefore, in closing, the report in front of you shows a balanced revenue budget for 21-22, a council tax at Band D of £1,340.72, a capital budget of 41 million, 54 million in future years, a revised MTFS and a capital strategy and treasury management strategy, along with prudential indicators for you to agree tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Caroline. Now on to members' questions to the Director of Corporate Services. Councillor Ward, please ask your question.
Thank you, Madam I understand that we've had to put more funds aside because the government have still not committed to paying the council full costs we face as a result of the dedicated grant. And can you say how much you've had aside and explain whether a certainty about the dedicated schools grant is affecting the council's ability to prepare for the future? Thank you.
Apologies. We have set aside a further 16.1 million over the 4 years of the MTFS. Clearly, this is money that could have been used to close the budget gap or invest in services. There does not appear to be any movement from the DfE on addressing this level of shortfall in funding at this stage. Thank you.
Councillor Crowe.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I would like to ask, what is the total amount of government funding confirmed or provided to the council, including for business and communities in Merton, for all support, containment and relief measures during the pandemic to date?
Apologies, Councillor. So the current data from MHCLG reports that we have received over 118 million provided from the government to support our businesses in our area. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Macon.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Could you tell me, how have business grants been distributed to businesses in Merton to support them through the COVID-19 fact? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. So, unlike other boroughs, either directly and automatically, so businesses do not need to apply as part of the national scheme. We have a, sorry, I'll start again. In general terms, for local restriction grants, businesses have made one application and we have paid them all the different eligible grants, unlike some other boroughs where they've had to apply many times. So we have paid small business grants to 1,496 businesses. We've paid 630 retail, hospitality and leisure grants, 163 discretionary grants, which are application based, lockdown grants of 5,074 local restriction grants. So one application and then automated the grant payments for them, mainly fortnightly. 650 closed business lockdown grants, 547 local restriction grants when we were in tier 2 and tier 3 last year, and a further 52 discretionary grant schemes. We were in the top 3 for payments of small businesses and retail grants in London in the first phase, and BIS are monitoring the situation closely and calling in authorities who have not been sufficiently fast enough in their eyes to pay out these grants, but we have not been called in, so that is good news. Thank you.
Councillor Simpson.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Director, at the February Council meeting, it was confirmed that the government has given £90.6 million to Merton to support local businesses, including business rates and cash grants. What payments has the council provided from its own reserves to help local businesses during this pandemic?
Thank you. So we have deferred approximately 1 million of business rates due in 2021 to 21-22. We are continuing to pay invoices immediately rather than waiting for the 30-day payment terms. We have deferred the first quarter of the commercial rents until later in the financial year, and the council also paid our 3 business improvement districts their allowances in advance. Thank you.
Councillor Bailey.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. First of all, can I check if you can hear me? Because sometimes I have Zoom problems. Yeah, okay. My question is about pupil referral units or alternative education providers. They take our most vulnerable children often away from their communities and peers to be educated separately. This isolation can create a really perfect hunting ground for young people to be exploited criminally by predators, both into county lines and into sexual exploitation. One of our amendments, supporting our future amendment, includes ways to help children escape these situations. With this in mind, can you please let us know how many children are sent to PRUs each year and what the costs of this are?
Thank you, Councillor. So pupil referral units are funded each year on a Place Plus model as directed by the Department for Education, funded from our Dedicated Schools Grant High Needs Block. So places are commissioned each year by the council to the setting up, and funding is allocated on the number of commissioned places plus top-up funding in support per place. So for 2020-21, we have 118 places at a total cost of 1.9 million. And for 2021-22, the number of places remains the same at 118, but at a cost of 2.1 million. Thank you.
Councillor Dehaney.
How much money has the council spent on COVID, and how much money has the government given us in response?
Thank you, Councillor. So based on the month 9 monitoring data and excluding grants for specific new functions, the council has spent 30.7 million and received 21.5 million to date. Thank you.
Councillor Southgate.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And my question to the Director, can you advise us of any late changes from the Cabinet budget meeting on the 22nd that affect us this evening? You've mentioned the Levelling Up Fund, and perhaps a little early yet to say what how much that 4.8 billion will come our way in Merton, but do you have any ideas about that?
Thank you, Councillor. I suppose the devil will be in the detail, and there is some indication that there may be monies for transport schemes, but up to a maximum of 20 million, and that would be for TfL and therefore the GLA to bid for. So not sure quite what will come forward at this stage. We are still awaiting determination of the public health grant and the Lee Valley levy. That information has still not come through, but we have made assumptions. The GLA precept was confirmed at their budget meeting on the 25th, and clearly the level of business rate reliefs and business support grants will be of relief to our businesses in the local area, and we will need to work through what that implication means and how we look to address those gaps. There is clearly also the infrastructure bank which is being set up, so again we need to see if there's any way that we can make access to that if we do need to for some of our regeneration schemes. Thank you.
Councillor Butler.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And I'd firstly like to take this opportunity to thank Caroline and her team for such great work in a constantly changing context. And we all appreciate how clear you've made the process in such difficult circumstances. To my question, can you confirm that the spending power the government have told residents in Merton that they're getting is dependent on council tax being increased by 4.99%? if we were to increase council tax by less, would we have the spending power that the government have said we should have? And if we don't raise council tax by that amount, how much would that gap in our budget be? And what would that money have to be found in cuts to services as well? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor, and thank you for those kind words. I will pass them on to the team. So an element of the increase in spending power assumes an increase in our council tax of 4.99%, also an increase in our council tax base. A lower council tax increase would result in less spending power, and the council tax increase is split into two elements. So a main element of 1.99% and a ring-fenced adult social care precept of 3%. So the 1.99% council tax increase equates to about 1.9 million in 21-22. And whilst in the short term this could be met from balancing the budget reserve, we would effectively lose 1.9 million funding from our base budget each year going forward, whilst council tax increase restrictions remain. As such, we would need to fill this gap with additional service savings. Thank you.
Councillor Bembo.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The question is, what is the amount of COVID 19 first being carried into the new financial year 2021 and 22. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. So the COVID-19 Emergency Funding Reserve represents the balance of non-ring-fenced COVID funding received from the government, topped up by some other grants and revenue budgets that is being carried forward into the new financial year. As set out on page 478 of the business plan, 4.9 million is now being carried forward into 21-22.
Councillor Chung.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. My question to the Director: how many people in Merton is the council supporting through the council tax support scheme? And can you tell us how many other councils out of the 343 in England have kept the same generous council tax support scheme in place since funding was reduced for these 9 years ago, as we have done in Merton? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. So we currently support 3,442 pension age claimants and 8,047 working age claimants. Unfortunately, we do not have the information on the council tax support scheme for England, but I can confirm that we are one of only 5 authorities in London who have kept the scheme in the same way as the government previously had it. Thank you.
Councillor Kohler.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Can the Director confirm that Merton has paid almost 2.3 million in apprenticeship levy to the Treasury over the past 4 years, whilst only 17 apprenticeships commenced in the current financial year, a number that's more than halved in each of the last 2 years? Please, can you also confirm how much money paid under the levy has now expired and how much must be spent by the end of the 2021-22 financial year to ensure no further funds expire by that date? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. So yes, I can confirm that Merton has paid the 2.3 million in apprenticeship levy over to HMRC. We have had 17 new starts this year, down from 43 last year. We have currently 72,000 of funds that have expired, and there is a potential risk of a further 339,000 by the year end of having to be returned. Thank you.
Councillor Braun.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you, Caroline, for your report. Your hard work in difficult circumstances is very appreciated. My question is, could you please explain how assumptions for the London living wage are built into this year's budget? Thank you.
Thank you. So assumptions for the cost of London living wage in new contracts to be let from 22-23 are built into the MTFS, rising from 521,000 in 22-23 to 2.4 million by the end of 24-25. Thank you.
We have used up the allocated 20 minutes, so I will move on. Now on to the leaders' speeches. Councillor Allison, Leader of the Council, you have 10 minutes to move the business plan report and to present your speech on the report.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This is my first speech as Leader of the Council, my first budget speech as Leader of the Council, and it comes at one of the most challenging times in the history of the borough. This time last year, we met in the council chamber to debate a budget that looked to the future. It was the last time we were all together in the chamber. Since then, everything that we were used to has changed. Over 120,000 people in the UK have died with COVID-19, including more than 400 people here in Merton. There is no higher priority for me than keeping our residents safe. And the challenges of COVID have come to the fore over the past month. The government have informed us of 2 entirely separate cases where Merton residents had been tested a month before and found to have the South African variant. Thankfully, those involved are now okay, but in order to ensure that the variant had not spread, this council agreed with the government that we would test everyone in the neighbourhoods affected, Pollard's Hill and Wimbledon Park. Those cases were entirely unrelated, but they have tested this council's capacity, and we have shown that we were ready. Merton genuinely is a great place and a great community, and because we have complied with the rules, infection rates have fallen by more than 3/4. And I want to use this opportunity in public to say I have been really impressed by the way the council has led our efforts, mobilising a huge team of our own staff, community groups like Commonside and volunteers to set up testing centres in both wards with the help of the health service and local charities. Because of our sensitivity and knowledge of the area, 10,000 people were offered tests in Pollard's Hill, and we're on track to test 5,000 people in Wimbledon Park by the end of this week. Our priority is to keep our residents safe, and we will do whatever it takes. But I also have to say, the events of this year have thrown up wider issues that are at the heart of my administration's priorities. It has become clear that the people most affected by COVID-19 are the poor, the disadvantaged, the vulnerable, including ethnic minorities. And those communities feel let down. If you are poor or from an ethnic minority, you are more likely to have lost your job. You're more likely to have lost income. Your children are more likely to have fallen behind at school because you don't have a laptop or access to data, and to have lost free school meals when they were cut. And of course, you're more likely to get ill or to suffer a bereavement. And yes, we've done well here in Merton in getting vaccines to those in need. But across the country, if you are poor or from an ethnic minority, you are less likely to have been vaccinated. So what we have learned this year is clear. The gap is widening. And if we do not act to help those who are disadvantaged, they will suffer. This health emergency has shown, we in the administration have concluded, that now is not the time to close our nearest accident and emergency. Closing that service will only widen inequalities, and I urge the government to reconsider its plans to downgrade St Helier and move services to a very affluent area in Belmont, Surrey. But this health emergency has also shown the importance of properly funding local authorities if our communities are to recover from this pandemic. Merton is a great place, a great community, and thankfully I've taken over a good council. I pay tribute to Stephen Allen Bretus. Together, We help to give Merton a real identity as businesslike, pragmatic, moderate, flexible, the kind of council that will work in partnership with others, collaborate, share. We've been transformed from a council where schools were failing to one where every secondary school is good or outstanding. And we're regularly in the top 5 in the country for the progress our children make. We built a new library, a new leisure centre. We found money to protect adult social care and children's services. And this year, when the government cut free school meals, we ensured we funded food for our local children. And not those awful boxes of half a tomato and some slices of cheese that we saw on the news, real vouchers that will actually help families. And we delivered 10 balanced budgets during the worst period of austerity this council has ever seen. And not only did those budgets have our values running through them, they've led to record satisfaction levels in resident surveys year after year, well ahead of the rest of the country. And yes, while the government forced the rest of the country to end rebates on council tax for the low paid, here in Merton, we've kept low council tax for those on low pay. And this budget continues in that tradition. Because ultimately, while there is a lot we all want to do, 3 things are going to dominate the council's agenda for some time: COVID, how we pay for it, and how we recover from it. When the pandemic started, the government said, do whatever it takes, and they would make sure we were funded. Well, unfortunately, that hasn't materialised. We did do whatever it takes, but they have not funded us for it. So we are being forced to make further cuts tonight. And they have told us we can only have the spending power even they say we need. We can only have it if we raise council tax by another 5%. These are the government's cuts, the government's COVID cuts, and the government's tax rises, the government's COVID tax rises. We are businesslike and we need to get on with the business of running this council. Yes, we have to deliver COVID cuts and increase COVID taxes, but we will use our values to do so in a fair way. And I'm grateful to our amazing staff and officers for helping put this budget together, led by Caroline Holland, an incredible director who has kept the show on the road when other councils have struggled, and her team who have been fantastic. And I'm grateful to have an outstanding cabinet who have shown they can make difficult decisions and take a lead. My deputies, Ellie, working to keep children safe and ensure they get a good education, and Owen ensuring we are in a position to build once this is all over. My cabinet member for finance, Tobin. I had 10 budgets in 10 years, but his first has been 10 times harder than any of mine. Tonight is his night and he's done a great job leading this budget through scrutiny. Then there's Marcy, ensuring we considered the equalities implications of the budget. Caroline, protecting culture, leisure and skills. Rebecca, protecting social care. Martin, looking after housing and regeneration and tackling the climate emergency. Agatha, protecting public safety. And of course, my 2 colleagues who have been safeguarding our environment and green spaces, Natasha, and during her maternity leave, Mike. We've made a fantastic team working together to protect our services at a difficult time. And yes, that means we have to make these COVID cuts and raise these COVID taxes. But I want to assure our residents that here in Merton, we are already looking at recovery. Everybody knows Merton is a great community and a great place for families. The community has come together when we have needed it during the pandemic. And now we want to take advantage of our great community to help us grow back again. And there are so many good things going on in Merton. Mutual Aid, the Don's Local Action Group, MVSC, all our fantastic charities. Since becoming leader, I've seen so many examples of people coming together to help. One of the first things I did as leader was launch Merton Together, a campaign with partners and charities to support our residents. Merton is a great place for families, but it's at its greatest when it's Merton together.
You have
And
a
if
minute
we
to
are
make
to
your
come out, and if we are to come out the other side of this awful pandemic, it will be because we have done so together. A strong council with strong values, helping those who need it. Merton together. This is a good budget, a fair budget. I thank all councillors for their role in bringing it together, and I commend it to our residents. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
The business plan report is to be seconded by Councillor Stringer.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I formally second the report and I reserve my right to speak if that's okay.
Councillor McLean, Leader of the Opposition, you have 9 minutes to speak.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And may I begin by thanking Director Holland and her team for their efforts in what has been a difficult and protracted budget process. A pandemic that most people expected would last a few months has now lasted 12. And in those 12 months, sadly, over 400 of our fellow residents have succumbed to this dreadful virus. And I would like to extend our deepest condolences to those that have lost loved ones. Our borough's resilience has been tested and the response has been filled with compassion, determination, and professionalism. Compassion from residents in coming to the aid of the most vulnerable as they shielded, a determination to ensure that no one was forgotten, and a professionalism from frontline workers as they continued with their duty in the most trying of circumstances. We would like to make a special mention of thanks to the hard work of Merton Council staff during the pandemic, especially frontline staff working with the most vulnerable. But we must now also focus on the many Merton residents who will be facing an uncertain financial future, and the local businesses that are struggling to survive and who will be so vital to our economic recovery. And that is why it was so disappointing to see Labour and Merton Park members of the Commission vote against a Conservative reference to Cabinet for further support for local businesses to aid Merton's economic recovery. An opportunity to show that we are all in this together. An opportunity to protect jobs. Well, tonight, members have the chance to demonstrate they care about the recovery of our high streets and the financial pressure Merton residents face. Our amendment seeks to establish a £500,000 High Street Recovery and Improvement Fund and to remove the emission-based parking charge. A fund to seed our local economic recovery and the removal of an ill-judged tax on motorists. A parking charge policy that will fail in its stated primary objective of improving air quality, a policy designed to make driving more expensive and that will hinder our recovery. People drive because it is the only practical way of getting around for many as they go about their daily lives. This policy is part of an anti-car agenda. Some, like Labour, do not try to hide it. Others prefer to talk from both sides of the same mouth. Madam Mayor, I suspect, as I've already heard, we will hear Labour councillors speak tonight and claim that the financial position of the council is all the fault of the government. I accept that the DSG settlement needs to be addressed, but the Labour administration cannot just run from its decisions. They have been the administration for 11 years, and they made political decisions that have had a direct effect on the financial position of the council. Labour decisions taken at a time of calm, which now means that our residents are facing a 4.99% increase in the council tax and the adult care precept, and a further 9.5% increase in the GLA precept from a Labour mayor. Labour decisions taken in previous years resulting in Labour taxes at the very time when Merton residents can least afford them. A misguided belief that Merton Labour's political priorities should simply be funded by central government. Complaints at the government that are just pure deflection. a ruse to hide the decisions that they have made over the last decade. We will hear a playlist, as we have already started to hear, of their golden oldie excuses, austerity, Brexit, or misrepresenting comments made at the start of the pandemic, comments relating to COVID costs only, comments made without knowledge of how long the crisis would last. There will be no mention of the extra grants that has been promised and delivered since, in particular, the 75% compensation of lost income, or that further grants are expected in the new financial year. And let's welcome the Chancellor's combination of business rate reductions, investment incentives, and other measures, including the High Street Restate Grant that were announced today to help business and the economy rebound powerfully. What we will hear will be puerile soundbites and economic illiteracy. We have a leader of the council who was cabinet member for finance for 10 years, and yet at a recent OSC meeting did not even know the council's financial position at the end of the last financial year. This basic information that cabinet member for finance should know, definitely not very businesslike. Tonight, with their 68 minutes of debate time, Labour will demonstrate that those who speak the most often say the least. Madam Mayor, we must now look to the future and the roadmap to recovery. The COVID-19 pandemic has brought sharply into focus how vital our homes, our neighbourhoods, and our local green spaces are to our physical and mental well-being. We must encourage developers to not just build greener, more beautiful homes, but also to create greener, more beautiful neighbourhoods. And that is why the failure of Merton Development Company is so depressing. Here was an opportunity for this Labour administration to demonstrate that they can lead in the delivery of housing. And they failed. And they failed because the administration took too long to obtain planning. The fees accumulated were too great, nearly 10% of the gross development value against a commercial norm of 5%, a difference of £1 million. 3 years, £2.1 million of council taxpayers' money, and not a single house built. Once again, dither and delay has allowed this Labour administration to be overtaken by events and at a cost to Merton taxpayer. How can residents have any confidence that this Labour-led council can deliver a regenerated Morden, or a regenerated Mitcham, or a vastly improved Wimbledon town centre, to deliver on the aspirations of Merton residents? The answer is they cannot. How can they? Madam Mayor, it was also delay that was the Conservative group's greatest concern for the future of St Helier Hospital. As stated in our consultation submissions, we preferred the site for the state-of-the-art acute emergency hospital to be at St Helier. But the health professionals made a different choice. And we had always said that we would accept their decision. Our overriding belief was that if the £500 million investment did not progress this time, then events, just like with other regeneration projects in Merton, may overtake any possibility of the investment ever happening. This issue has been ongoing for 2 decades, and we acknowledge the intense emotion that it generates, but no more delay. Now is the time to come together and acknowledge the massive benefits to clinical outcome that the £500 million investment will bring to Merton's local healthcare provision. State-of-the-art care, the right care in the right place.
You have a minute remaining.
And Madam Mayor, it is also our desire to ensure the right care is in the right place and at the right time, that we seek to defer the closure of the daycare centres. We agree with the need for a review, but this must be undertaken without the threat of closure. Madam Mayor, our focus must now be on the recovery and the strong leadership needed to deliver it. Strong leadership and vision. But instead, we have a council leader who barely has the support of half the Labour group. And most damning of all, a deeply divided cabinet, unable to deliver the reforms the borough needs. This is not the leadership Merton residents deserve at this precarious time. We have a Wizard of Oz leader. Draw back the curtain and all you find is the MP for Mitcham and Morden, someone who's not even a member of this council. Weak leadership and no vision.
No, I mean, it's
Merton needs a roadmap to recovery. Instead, this Labour administration provides a roadmap to nowhere.
Councillor Fairclough, leader of the Liberal Democrat group, you have 4 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and I'd also like to thank officers for their work on the budget. Now, despite the COVID grants that the government has given, it's clear that local authorities, which have endured central government funding cuts of nearly 50% since 2010, still need to bridge hefty budget gaps. So it's yet another year of cuts and council tax increases. The 2019 LGA survey of council finances found that 1 in 3 councils feared that they would run out of money to provide even their statutory duties by 23, and this rose to almost 2/3 of councils by 24, 25 or later, and that was pre-COVID. So Croydon is unlikely to be the only casualty. But even within that framework, the administration makes its own choices and its own luck. The new leader tells us this is Merton together. But we don't get a sense of that from this budget. Now, I don't know about business-like, but it's certainly business as usual. The Conservative amendment talks about embracing an ambitious vision, but a vision isn't just a vague brain dump of ideas stuck on the front of a budget. Madam Mayor, Merton needs to be bold and creative. This budget should set out ways to help capture the best of the public's response to the pandemic and focus on the future that we want to see. 2020 saw people come together to support their neighbours, from Merton Mutual Aid, the Dom's Trust, to the many individual acts of kindness and charity. The local voluntary sector has never worked more closely or cohesively to support residents. We saw residents and businesses donate to help cover free school meals during holidays. Madam Mayor, as a council, we must do what we can to create the best environment to help our communities come together to meet the challenges we face head on. And it's easy to praise residents' choices, but if you're not paid enough, if your housing is secure or badly maintained, if you don't get the support you need as a carer, a young person, an older person, or if you have a disability, then you are not free to live how you choose. The mental health implications of the COVID pandemic are being increasingly understood. ONS data indicates a doubling of adults experiencing some form of depression from nearly 10% before the pandemic to nearly 20% in June 2020. And mental health inequalities have just got wider. So tonight, our amendments are about tweaking this budget to focus on increasing freedom of choice. Our amendment number 1 supports those care workers on the front line, an issue we've long fought for. Our amendment 2 looks to better resource Merton's climate emergency response and to mitigate some, but not all, of the worst in the council's new parking charges increases. Our Amendment 3 reflects people's generosity in 2020 and is a trial of a new breakfast club scheme that would support a number of families. Our Amendments 4 and 5 are to give some clarity and focus on issues affecting young people, older people and people with disabilities. Now, we too have lots of concerns about the reorganisation of services around children's centres, day centres, and we want to look at this in much more detail. So let's retain the good from the pandemic and keep in mind those who are often forgotten. Let's build a brighter future for our young people. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Councillor Southgate, leader of the Merton Park Ward Independent Residents, you have 3 minutes.
Sorry, let's start again. In the short time available to me, I will draw on what we have learned through scrutiny of the budget this year. We added a 3rd round of scrutiny. That was not so much to find late savings as to take account of last-minute information coming from the government. Still, none of us have experienced a year-long pandemic before, have we? The final outcome is not as bad as we feared back in December. We've not had to make any staff redundant, neither have we been forced into hasty cuts to services. Compensation is still outstanding for lost income from sales, fees and charges will go some way towards replenishing the reserves used to close the budget gap, both in the year ahead and for 22-23. And the Department for Education effectively admits that the deficit on the dedicated schools grant is unsustainable without offering a solution yet. Any movement on this would transform our financial position. There are reasons then for cautious optimism. Unlike some neighbouring boroughs in South London, there's no threat of a Section 114 notice. We're not going bust. We can afford to breathe a little more easily. Against that, we know we face a changed landscape as we emerge from the pandemic. And in many ways, it will be a landscape change for the worse. Inequalities between east and west of the borough have been exacerbated by the pandemic, with higher infection rates in the east. And it is the most vulnerable members of our community who have suffered the most. Think of pupils struggling with homeschooling without adequate IT kit, parents with frontline jobs who cannot work from home, trying to juggle childcare responsibilities, those shielding and the elderly who live alone and have been in lockdown for much of the past year, those with disabilities and mental health issues. The pandemic will leave a long-term legacy that we do not begin to understand now, but it will stretch our social services. As we review how we provide those services over the next 2 years, it's not simply a matter of smarter ways of continuing what we do now. We need to expand our services to rebuild cohesive communities, and cohesion rather than cost saving must be the goal. This is the right time to take stock as we embark on rebuilding after the pandemic. So the recently announced Your Merton consultation is timely, but let's make sure it leads somewhere. We haven't had a straightforward statement of our aspirations for Merton since the July principles penned by the two Marks, and that was 10 years ago, largely in response to the age of austerity. So I encourage the administration to use this consultation as a basis for setting out its ambitions for Merton and how it proposes to achieve them. Thank you.
I will now invite members of the Cabinet to comment on the report. Councillor Byers.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Can I start by thanking Caroline Holland, Roger Kershaw, and everyone in their teams for all of the work that has gone into producing the business plan. I also want to pay tribute to all council staff, Madam Mayor, who have been phenomenal over the past 12 months. It is absolutely right that all staff were given an additional day off in recognition of this, and it is disappointing the opposition deemed this a gimmick. In addition, I want to pay tribute to all those who work with the council as contractors, whether they are keeping our streets clean, working in our parks and green spaces, or supporting our elderly and vulnerable residents at home. The administration's strong ambition is to ensure that future contracts are relet at the London living wage, and this money is built into the MTFS. We are therefore minded to support the Liberal Democrat motion on the London living wage, albeit the business plan already contains that ambition. Madam Mayor, when I spoke at the budget meeting last year, I spoke of a lost decade, with life expectancy falling and inequality rising after 10 years of government austerity. This evening, I could talk of a lost year, as the pandemic has taken hold in a way that few of us could ever have imagined, impacting all areas of our lives. On the 16th of March 2020, on a call with council leaders, the Housing, Communities and Local Government Secretary told local authorities to do whatever is necessary to support their communities and that the government would support them. Madam Mayor, in the past 12 months, this administration has done just that. We worked at breakneck speed in the spring to set up the community hub with our voluntary sector partners, ensuring residents who needed support could access it. We worked closely with our care homes and domiciliary care providers, providing guidance, support and PPE at a time when all three were lacking from the government. We ensured that statutory services continued to run, parks remained open, bins were collected, and residents could access services throughout the year. And we supported families across the borough who have been hardest hit by the pandemic through the Council Tax Support Scheme, which has seen unprecedented demand this year. This administration, Madam Mayor, has done whatever is necessary. The government, sadly, has not. It failed care homes by giving no focus or attention to social care in the early months of the pandemic. It failed workers by constantly delaying announcements on support until the very last moment, too late for many. And it failed the country with its constant dithering at a time when strong leadership was called for but was missing. The government's definition of whatever is necessary, Madam Mayor, is to tell local authorities to raise taxes, putting additional pressure on people already struggling with the pandemic. The government's definition of whatever is necessary, Madam Mayor, is to provide no long-term certainty to help us plan for future years, but just paper over the cracks with a series of one-off grants. And to those who say the Secretary of State will come good on his promise eventually, Madam Mayor, I would remind them that we are still waiting on a green paper setting out a sustainable plan for adult social care, first promised in the budget in March 2017, some 4 years ago. Madam Mayor, whether they're breaking promises, breaking lockdown rules, or simply breaking the law, as the Secretary of State for Health and Social Care was found to have done only last week, the government's words count for little. Madam Mayor, this administration will continue to do whatever is necessary, which is why this budget protects frontline services, protects the council tax support scheme, and ensures we can continue supporting the most vulnerable residents over the next year, which promises to be every bit as challenging as the previous one. Madam Mayor, I commend this budget to all colleagues.
Councillor Skeet.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. It is my privilege to speak on the budget as Cabinet Member for Women and Equalities. As a woman of ethnic minority who lives in a part of the borough that is not affluent, this past year has shown me how important it is to treat equalities as a priority. Madam Mayor, people like me who live where I live have suffered the most as a result of the pandemic. We are likely to lose our job. We are likely to lose our job, to get ill, to have financial difficulties, and to lose family or friends to this terrible virus. I want to thank our staff who has done an amazing job over the past year, and to thank our committee who has risen to the task. Merton is a great place, and our staff and our residents have been brilliant. But the government has not paid us the full cost of COVID after a decade of austerity. So we are having to make further cuts, even though there is not much left to cut. Madam Mayor, they have all told councils that like Merton, we only have the spending power. We need to deal with the COVID if we could put up council tax. So this budget includes COVID cuts and includes council taxes. This is because of government policy. But my job as a cabinet member for equalities is to make sure that these COVID cuts and COVID taxes are fair. I'm pleased to say I have made sure Merton is fully considered the equalities impact of our decisions. A business-like council understands the diversity of its community and takes this into account in our decisions. Madam Mayor, we have a very good scrutiny system in Merton, and our scrutiny panel have looked at all the equalities impact on our decisions. A large part of our services we provide to other people of ethnic minority and disadvantaged groups. And that means that when we are forced to make cuts, these cuts are bound to have an impact on ethnic minorities and the disadvantaged. I'm also pleased to say that we are keeping Merton's council tax support scheme, which has been praised by charities at other council alike. As a result, the poorest residents will not have to pay a penny more in council tax, and we are exempt
Have a minute remaining
from the government's council tax. So I want to thank my colleagues for making a fair decisions and with best practice on equalities. This has not been an easy year, but I am proud to be leading Merton's fight for equalities, and I support the budget. Thank you.
We will now take the amendments in turn. Councillor Gretton, please will you formally move the Conservative budget amendment?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm delighted to formally propose the amendment.
The amendment seconder is Councillor Adam Bush.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I formally second it.
Councillor Fairclough, please will you formally move the Liberal Democrat Budget Amendment 1?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I formally move Amendment 1.
The amendment seconder is Councillor Bailey.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I formally second.
Councillor Fairclough, please will you formally move the Liberal Democrat Budget Amendment 2?
Madam Mayor, I formally move Amendment number 2.
The amendment is seconded by Councillor Bailey.
Madam Mayor, I formally second. Thank you.
Councillor Fairclough, please will you formally move the Liberal Democrat Budget Amendment 3? The amendment seconder is Councillor Bailey.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I formally second.
Councillor Fairclough, please will you formally move the Liberal Democrat Budget Amendment 4?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm delighted to move Amendment number.
The amendment is seconded by Councillor Bailey.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I formally second.
Councillor Fairclough, please will you formally move the Liberal Democrat Budget Amendment 5?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm sure everyone is relieved that I'm formally moving Amendment number 5.
I think you asked me to formally second, so I formally second, Madam Mayor.
I will now open up the floor to members for the main debate. Firstly, Councillor Alan Brittas.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. March 2011 was when I presented my first ever budget as the Labour Council leader here in Merton. I continued to do so for 10 remarkable years, and I'm pleased that unlike the atrocious transition of power across the pond, here in Merton, that QPR fan has smoothly taken over from this Fulham fan, leaders following clubs steeped in history. And so to a very contemporary history lesson for the opposition from me, Madam Mayor. The late and great Councillor Danny Connellan always taught the other side some salient history lessons in years gone by. And so here beginneth tonight's history lesson. I call it Merton 2010 through to 2020. A decade of delivery, mark my words, it is a good read. A decade of delivery. Then when our budgets meant we looked after our most vulnerable people, we created 4,500 extra primary school places. We built a brand new library. We built a new secondary school. We built a brand new leisure centre in a park setting. We brought the Wombles back to Wimbledon, Madam Mayor, in the face of opposition from the current and misguided Prime Minister when he was the invisible Mayor of London, costing the club hundreds of thousands of pounds by calling that lovely application in. And in the face of austerity, we froze the council tax for 6 years, absorbed the nasty council tax support cut that thus helping low-income households. And as we've heard from Caroline Holland, thousands of people and households have been helped. But you know what? Setting the budget under the Con-Lib coalition and lately under this Conservative government got harder and harder each year. And we've just heard from our new leader, Mark Allison, how hard it is this year too. And so my heart goes out to Mark, to Tobin, and to our innovative co-deputy leaders, Councillor Stringer and Pritchard, and to all the cabinet.
You have a minute left.
Mark has reminded us that we were promised by the government to do whatever it takes and they would compensate us. Yet we get no real help at all for protecting our residents during a raging pandemic. And in all those years, the opposition failed to acknowledge scrutiny, blithely throwing amendments when we're already doing the work, and the press releases are ready for the tweet, the app, the Facebook, ready to be clicked. And it's with deep regret there's been no real help from the Tory budgets from the House of Commons in that other place. And no support for the police, for public transport, and for local authorities. And all this means a new era of austerity is coming. So here's a challenge to the Tories. Look up Sir Merrick Kirkell. Look up Baroness Margaret Eaton. They were former chairs of the Local Government Association, and they criticised their government for not supporting local government. Read their speeches, read them and understand them. Thank you, Madam
Time's
Mayor.
up.
Councillor Gretton.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Madam Mayor, the Conservative budget amendment is for the residents and community of Merton, and it's an amendment that puts our borough on the road to a green and prosperous recovery, prioritises the health and well-being of our young persons and gives support to the most vulnerable and senior citizens in our borough and to the family members who care for them. Madam Mayor, if you saw last week's meeting of the Labour Cabinet, councillors Alison and Byers sat there with their rather drab business plan, not seeming to have any idea about what we heard the director just confirm. The government has given Merton Council £5 million more than the council has actually spent on COVID. So the council's now got a £5 million reserve to carry into the new financial year. That's hidden at page 478, Madam Mayor, of the business plan. Nobody in the Labour Cabinet thought it important, however, Madam Mayor, to mention things like recovery, support for local business, or our high streets. None of them mentioned building greener, better town centres, planting trees, or tackling climate change. None of them mentioned regeneration or building better housing. Madam Mayor, we all know that the Labour administration of Merton Council, forever at the beckoning call of Siobhan McDonough, it seems, is renowned in the world of local government, renowned for not having much of an idea about what is going on in its own borough. Remember how the Cabinet had no idea, Madam Mayor, if the borough had a surplus or deficit at the end of the financial year. And most organisations, Madam Mayor, that would be enough to show the Cabinet member for Finance the door, but not Merton Labour, Madam Mayor. No, they decided it made him exactly the right person to be their leader. Madam Mayor, in our budget amendment, we set out the Conservative plan for the recovery of Merton, a £500,000 high street improvement fund, and exciting proposals to suspend street licence charges so pop-ups and markets can flourish in our streets. We set out ambitious plans for cycling, a new electric bike scheme as well, and the acceleration of electric vehicle infrastructure and planting more trees across the whole borough. Madam Mayor, we put on hold Labour's shocking plans to close the
Have a minute left.
knowing how important they are to help our more vulnerable citizens get out and about and how important they are to give family members respite from daily care. And, Madam Mayor, we amend the budget by removing the new tax on Wimbledon, the parking tax that will damage the recovery of our town centres. Not content with a high council tax in Wimbledon, Labour and Liberal Democrat have joined forces in among the councillors, and they have agreed to massively ramp up parking permit fees for residents in Wimbledon to nearly £700 a year. We remember Councillor Paul Kohler's own words, Madam Mayor, when he called for, and I quote, a vast increase in the cost of parking in Wimbledon. Madam Mayor, our amendment will kick this terrible tax out once and for all, unlike the Liberal Democrat amendment, which accepts and embraces Labour's £700 parking fees. Madam Mayor, our amendment is a motion of optimism, a motion for recovery, and I'm delighted to move it to this chamber. Thank you.
Councillor Lanning.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Madam Mayor, to say this year has been difficult would be an understatement. Not one of us has been spared the ravages of COVID, with the effect of the virus rippling out across society. And at the forefront of the UK's response to the virus has been local government. Madam Mayor, here in Merton, we mobilised at unprecedented speed to set up testing centres to halt community transmission, rising to the challenge with just 48 hours notice to test 10,000 residents in Pollard's Hill in less than 2 weeks. We launched a local case tracing system when the national scheme fell short, ensuring our most vulnerable residents were signposted to our community hub, which we set up with voluntary sector partners to provide food, medicine and social support to those hardest hit. And Madam Mayor, will still be there at the forefront to respond to the impact of COVID for years to come, to support the families hit hardest by job losses and the children who have lost a year of learning and play. And we will do this in the face of a crippling financial outlook. Because, Madam Mayor, while no one could have anticipated a global pandemic on this scale, local government is no stranger to delivering in the context of crisis, where our funding has been cut by 63% in the last 10 years, and demands on some of our most critical services like social care increase. Madam Mayor, it's been 4 years since the Adult Social Care Green Paper was promised and 2 years since the Prime Minister pledged to fix the care crisis once and for all. Yet in the last year, our care homes have been turned into prisons, with families denied even basic visits. Madam Mayor, our most vulnerable loved ones can't keep waiting. Resilience and innovation are the hallmarks of local government. And here in Merton, our commitment to our parents living with dementia and our children with special educational needs and disabilities remains unchanged. We will do whatever is necessary, stepping in as we always do where the government has failed. This means leading with our vision for a community that empowers some of the most marginalised groups in society, like our residents with learning disabilities, where young people are 3 times more likely to not have a close friend, 7 times more likely to be excluded, and 4 times more likely to experience mental health problems than their non-learning disabled peers. By the time they reach adulthood, Madam Mayor, they are twice as likely to be living in poverty, and while far less likely to be employed, if they do have a job, it will likely be part-time and poorly paid. This is not the future that we in Merton want for our learning disabled residents. Our aspirations for them, Madam Mayor, are no different to those we have for any of our residents, to lead happy and fulfilled lives. And that is why I am proud that the saving in this budget is an opportunity, building on work already 2 years in the making to transform daycare opportunities. One that recognises there isn't a one-size-fits-all approach to care, and one that relies on co-production to create the options and
You have a minute
choice
left.
that our users tell us they want. Madam Mayor, COVID has changed what the future looks like for us all. It will change how we interact, how we work, and how we prioritise. It is only right that as we plan our community's future, we take with us those who are too often excluded and too often in the margins of society, that we eliminate barriers, place people's aspirations for their life at the centre of their care, and empower them to not only participate, but to thrive. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Councillor Moulton.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Madam Mayor, you may recall that it was at our last November meeting that I spoke about the importance of our vaccination programme. As Professor Robin Shattuck, immunologist at Imperial College, clearly states, vaccines, next to clean water, have been the single most effective public health implementation globally. And I stated then that the current COVID-19 pandemic, they are a light at the end of our tunnel, and there were positively early reports from 2 of the vaccines in development. It's transpired that we now have 3 vaccines authorised by the MHRA for use in the UK, and a further 3 on the way. Indeed, we have now over 20.5 million people vaccinated against coronavirus in the UK. And in Merton, as of 4 days ago, 46,596 had received their first vaccination. Madam Mayor, I know that you have been thanking the unsung heroes of the volunteer workforce.
Have a minute left.
And I would like all of us to give a shout out to the army of volunteers across Merton, giving their time to get us through this pandemic. When we emerge, we need to embed these wonderful volunteer networks and partnerships to use for future community engagement and projects. Madam Mayor, this has been the fastest and most successful rollout of vaccination in history. And today, the Chancellor announced 1.6 billion to further boost the COVID-19 vaccination rollout, to maintain the speed and momentum and allow us to reopen the economy. These vaccines are indeed important, not just to offer protection required for our residents, but also for our borough's road to recovery. Recovery of the high streets and shopping parades, sport and gyms, and cultural and hospitality sectors, so important for the employment and ultimately the health and well-being of everyone living and working in our borough. Please support our amendment and support the path to recovery. Thank you.
Councillor Pearce.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. For far too many years now, we as a council have been faced with having to make more and more difficult decisions about the services we provide to our residents. every year we go through a detailed scrutiny process where we can really question the cabinet members and the officers and make sure that the interests of our residents are being served. But that gets harder and harder every year after all these 10 years of Tory austerity. And I'll say it again because it's true. 10 years of Tory austerity. My eldest granddaughter has never known anything else. Margaret Thatcher wanted this to dismantle as best she could, the welfare state. Cameron and his cowboys 10 years ago actually set about trying to do it. They have loads of empathy at the moment, Boris Johnson and his team, about supporting businesses and supporting business workers, and that's fine. But they seem to have absolute with council services. They don't mind if council services wither away under lack of funding. And now that government can't even reimburse our council for everything we've spent. They leave us short and they expect councils to manage. I've been amazed, Madam Mayor, by the brilliant response of our council, our officers, and yes, our residents helping out. And I wish I could have helped, but I am one of those unfortunate people who's been stuck indoors. Unfortunately, I've been really amazed
I have a minute
by the
left.
way our communities have come together. I've had people knocking on my door, not asking me, can I do something for them, but them asking, can they do something for me? The fact that the Tory government won't make sure that councils receive the money they have spent looking after people through pandemic, it's just like the St Helier decision, heartless, without a thought for those people who really need it in the most deprived areas of Mitcham and Morden. I think I support this balanced budget and I deplore the Tories' attitude to the way they finance. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Councillor McGrath.
Madam Mayor, I'm going to speak on Amendment 1. You may recall, Madam Mayor, it was back in November 2012 that the Merton Lib Dems started campaigning for all of Merton's staff to be paid the London living wage. I asked a public question at the meeting, the council meeting, and I was told it would cost £275,000 just for directly employed staff, and there was a whole host of very complicated difficulties. Mysteriously, though, a few months later, the Cabinet decided that it could afford to pay this, that it would only cost £45,000 for directly employed staff, and that the many difficulties have suddenly disappeared. In 2017, Councillor Mary Jane Jeans and Councillor Southgate put forward a motion asking the council to extend the London living wage to care workers employed by Merton. It was voted down. Madam Mayor, I could go on through the long list of questions and motions and amendments that have been put forward by the Lib Dem group and rejected by the Labour Party, but I'm not going to, because ultimately that doesn't matter.
Minute left.
What does matter is that the Labour group have finally agreed to support this and to include sufficient money in the budget. What we do need to do is make sure they can't backslide, and one way of doing that is to formally sign up to to become a living wage employer, and I hope that the Cabinet will consider that. We certainly intend to make sure that they have the opportunity to do so. Madam Mayor, this increase between the minimum wage and the London living wage will make a real difference to the lives of some of the poorest but hardest working people in our borough. So I hope it will get unanimous support for this motion. Thank you.
Councillor Brunt.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. As we've heard tonight, already the government has not fully recognised the cost of COVID and the impact it has on local authorities. I don't think Councillor Gretton was listening to the answer the director gave to Councillor Dehaney's question, where I calculated that difference to be a £9 million gap. The pressure has been immense, and yet I'm proud to say that the refuse and recycling service, The street sweeping service and the service in our parks has continued uninterrupted throughout. Even when snow hit just for one weekend earlier this year, it was uninterrupted. With residents largely working at home, there's been an increase in waste, recycling, and other pressures on our parks. And yet we've coped due to the dedication of all those involved, whether they be Merton staff, Veolia staff, or ID Verdi staff. Against this backdrop, the staff have also supported surge testing as a result of the identification of the South African variant of COVID-19 in the borough. It's disappointing, therefore, that I've heard members of the Conservative group criticise the granting of an extra day of leave in recognition of the huge effort of staff. It's not been said yet tonight, but I'm sure it will come back again as it did in earlier meetings. They deliver they've worked exceptionally hard to deliver regular services expected of any borough, but also the additional challenges of the pandemic. How many of the opposition have been given toil, time off in lieu days, when work pressures have meant that they've put in extra hours? How mean-spirited they are to deny the same privilege to our staff who have delivered exceptional services in exceptional times. As I've said before, this demonstrates a lack of understanding.
You have a minute left.
Lack of understanding of the difference between management and leadership. Management alone does not automatically include leadership. Leadership recognizes and inspires staff and includes good management. The success that brings is immense. This contrasts with the dither and delay of an incompetent government that lacks leadership. We have shown local leadership will continue to work hard to do that, despite the austerity that has been brought by this government.
Councillor Omar Bush.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. For economic growth, you need an educated workforce. The government see apprenticeships as an opportunity to get more school and college leavers to earn and learn, so they can develop the skills that will help them flourish in their careers and support the economic growth the country needs. Central to this is raising awareness amongst young people from less advantaged backgrounds about going down the route of earn and learn to start building long-term careers while being paid. Many of our key industries are crying out for skilled workers to train on the job. So it's a tragedy if we fail to reach those who desperately need this chance. It's a shame that this Labour-run administration interest in apprenticeship has dropped off since 2014. This needs to be revived. This is further highlighted with the council broadening the scope to adults and losing its vital focus on young people. And
you have a minute left.
There were almost 743,000 people participating in apprenticeships in 2018-19, but reaction to the pandemic crisis was swift. 6 out of 10 employers stopped all new apprenticeships when the coronavirus took hold. Last summer, the government announced incentive payments for employers hiring new apprentices between August last year and March 2021. The continued support by the government was further highlighted in today's budget, which is more than doubling apprentice payments to £3,000 for all new hirers of any age. This will also equate in more than 40,000 extra young people in England being able to benefit from the 126 million investment in traineeships too. The government's prompt action and recent announcement of opportunity guarantee measures, including the Kickstart scheme, are welcome and will help towards supporting young people through difficult periods.
Councillor Fraser.
Sorry. Thank you. Madam Mayor, I'm grateful for the privilege of speaking at this meeting. This is my first full council meeting following my election as chair to the Children and Young People's Scrutiny Panel, CYP. This has been a challenging year in many respects. This pandemic virus has created great need and affected work-life balance for all of us, particularly our children. Some of our children, due to vulnerabilities, needed to be schooled. Madam Mayor, children come in different ages, abilities, physical, emotional, and educational needs, to name but a few. Our staffs have been phenomenal, as some are on site, as well as ensuring the needs of our children are met virtually. As a lecturer, I know how difficult it can be to maintain classroom settings, let alone ensuring all the aforementioned needs are being met. Tonight is budget night, Madam Mayor. I don't think this has been missed by any of us. I give thanks to the Director, Caroline Holland, and other directors, especially Hannah Dowdy and her team, not forgetting Rachel Bordeaux, all the officers, and of course the councillors, who over the many scrutiny meetings have paid attention and effectively applied the rules of scrutiny to get us to this juncture. Madam Mayor, I've noted in one of the Lib Dem Amendments, they tried to find something to say. Ofsted did come to Merton in October. If the Lib Dem had read their reports, they would have spotted that Ofsted is hardly known for giving praise to substantial evidence, but they spotted, they spotted the Ofsted, hardly known for giving praises. Children at risk from sexual orientation received an effective service, and as a result, risk reduces. However, as corporate parents, we on the CYP scrutiny panel were attentive to the spending and savings, so not only are our children being looked after now, but for the foreseeable future. Thank you.
Councillor Holden.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So here we go again, another year and another hike in parking taxes by this Labour Council. What is it with Labour and their dislike of private car ownership? Is it a case of, if it moves, then tax it? The innocent residents who drive, and even those who don't and only receive visitors, despise being viewed as some form of golden goose to be plucked at will by this Labour Council when they need extra income. How will you survive if you happen to kill off the golden goose? In this time of COVID, with many residents nervous about close mixing on public transport and many feeling the pinch financially, it is wrong for this Labour Council to then increase parking taxes. This administration is unduly hitting residents' disposable income, both by increased charges whilst they park at home, and again when they choose to park in the town centres and car parks. Therefore, this will adversely impact the very shops, businesses and hospitality venues on the high street which rely on cars to be accessed.
Have a minute left.
Right at the point when we need these businesses to bounce back as part of our economic recovery. The high cost of parking will be the death of the high street, and many residents will simply go out of borough instead of supporting our businesses here. Not exactly business-like by Labour Council, is it? I call on this Labour Council to ban the tax.
Councillor Gould.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Amendment 2. We want to make improvements on the ill-conceived parking charges increase policy, making charges fairer so the polluter has to pay, not the householder, for their choice of location. Everyone with off-street parking and not in the CPZ area could have the most polluting car and pay nothing. Consequently, front gardens are being dug up at an alarming rate, converted to parking spaces. 17 in CPZs this last year. This will do little for Merton's biodiversity or air quality, much like Councillor McLean's fantasy unfunded breeding project for Cannon Hill and Councillor Dean's daffodils. We ask the Council to consider the implementation of a low mileage, low use discount or rebate for this policy. This would encourage less driving and would mitigate the impact of higher parking costs for those on low fixed incomes who cannot afford to switch to environmentally friendly vehicles. Visitors' e-permits and scratch cards need to be reconsidered. Seeming ineffective and discriminating against those groups likely to need a greater number of visitors from family or care workers.
Have a minute
What
left.
policy may have inadvertently highlighted is the poorest in society generally do not own cars. What is certainly true is the poorest in society are negatively affected by car use. We hope the Council considers this and helps those in areas of the borough with poor air quality to improve and implement clean air strategies from the monies generated by this policy. Our amendment asks to utilise funding from the policy for a dedicated officer to fulfil the role for grant funding applications for the Climate Action Plan. As Rishi Sunak's budget did nothing for climate change, we need to do whatever it takes. As nature doesn't do bailouts, we need to work cross-party for evidence-based solutions. Disappointing to hear the Conservatives this week on social media siding with climate change deniers. Nonetheless, I hope they support our amendment along with all members for these critically important endeavours to help fund the Climate Action Plan. Thank you.
Councillor Draper.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. So in past years, I thought, here we go, it's another council budget meeting. But it's a different year, isn't it? And I want to obviously thank Caroline and her staff, but I'd also like to thank the amazing council staff who I worked alongside as we delivered COVID kits around Pollard's Hill in snow and sub-zero temperatures. Because no amount of negativity or cynical put-downs could dent them. And so I have to confess, I was horrified to hear a Conservative councillor at Scrutiny accusing us of gimmickry for offering them a free day off. Disgusting. Nor will we take any notice of Tory councillors telling us we're divided or incompetent, because they and we know how committed we all are, that's officers and councillors, to serving the people of this borough. And as Marcus said, the most disadvantaged of this borough first and foremost, which is why I'm delighted we're retaining the council tax support scheme. And yeah, I wish we could do it all we've done this year at no extra cost. I wish we could do it at no cost at all, quite frankly. Yeah, I know that Robert Jenrick's promise to do everything necessary wasn't really a promise. I understand that, of course, he's a Tory politician. Yeah, I know that the government didn't mean it when they told us we had to fund it with a 4.9 tax rise. And and I wish that we could ignore climate change like the Conservatives tend to do. But let's park all that. Let's park all that. I know that we here will do it together and we'll do it right. And with this budget and with this leadership,
Have a minute left.
We're going to go on doing it because we won't give up on you, Merton. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Councillor Janice Holland.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd like to start by saying what a fantastic fundraising effort you have made during these COVID times and how brilliantly you've managed online. So a real well done from me. During my mayoral year, I was able to visit very many places in the borough and the wide variety of communities that make up the borough of Merton. Of the many town centres, it was clear to me that all of them needed support, especially as we recover from the economic effects of the pandemic. In particular, Morden would benefit from inward investment. Instead, Labour failed to bid for Morden regeneration from the Future High Streets Fund, which gave over £1 million to Wandsworth Council and over 11 million to Sutton Council for regeneration projects. Unfortunately, Morden was not included and the council submitted bids for Merton High.
Have a minute remaining.
Instead, it is due to Labour's inaction that an opportunity to secure 54.5 million from the GLA Land Fund was missed. Instead, the Labour administration wasted thousands of pounds of taxpayers' money attending the MIPIM conference in 2019. I know that Morden and Merton deserve better. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Councillor Henry.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I am proud to have been appointed by the Leader of the Council as his champion for tackling food poverty. This year has been very hard for everyone in Merton and across the country. In my ward, Pollard's Hill, people have been really struggling, but I'm so proud of my community and the way everyone has responded. I volunteered at a food bank, and I've been shocked to see so many more people using the food bank than ever before. COVID-19 has meant people have lost their jobs and their businesses has suffered. The food bank is a real lifeline for them, and I'm proud that people come together every week to support the community. Nobody should go hungry, Madam Mayor. When the government drag his feet about school children being given food during school holidays, Merton Council quickly responded to make sure families have their vouchers. No child should go hungry, Madam Mayor. The increase we see in food poverty is a national shame, and it is because this government does not care about inequality. The government also does not care about reimbursing local authorities for everything they have done and continue to do in response to the COVID-19 pandemic. Madam Mayor, in the budget, and though all the scrutiny process, we have had to make a really tough decision because the costs of COVID are not being paid back. And because we have had years and years of Tory austerity. But
time's up.
Thank you.
Councillor Southgate.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor, and for the opportunity to comment on amendments proposed by our colleagues from the opposition benches. At this point in past years, I've often found myself saying, well, if these are such wonderful ideas now, why didn't we hear about them earlier through the scrutiny stages? Except this time, a lot of them, in fact, were first highlighted in scrutiny, going back to November. So that's gratifying, although it would have been good to have some more resolutions put forward at the time. Now, if I can comment first on the Conservative amendment, I thank them particularly for putting all their proposals in one composite amendment, which we can vote on in one roll call. We particularly support deferring CH100 adult social care, flagged up by the Commission in November, to allow for further consultation post-COVID. A lot of concerns been expressed about this in emails I've received. It shouldn't be done just to save money. Well, on tree planting, we note that only 46,200 of the 126,000 budget for street trees has been spent in the current year. It's not more money that's needed, it's the will to utilise what we've already got. But I will say we do not see how withdrawing the planned increase in the emissions-based parking charges is going to help improve air quality, no matter that they are unpopular with motorists. Now, turning to the 5 Lib Dem Amendments, if I may, and the 5 roll call votes we have to look forward to, we're fully supportive of the intent to move towards the London living wage. Of course we are. It's a moral issue. It's also a pragmatic consideration. Employers in the care sector who do not pay the living wage will soon struggle to find staff. And yes, of course, we support the appointment of an officer to strengthen the climate change team on applications for funding. Remember that idea from somewhere else.
Minute remaining.
But we wouldn't try to hypothecate parking reserves in this way, as it could be open to challenge. We regard a low mileage rebate as impractical, and I would point out that many car workers are exempt from parking charges. Amendments 4 and 5, yes, certainly those savings do concern us greatly, and our concerns have not been answered satisfactorily. If I jump to the end, I think I'm running out of time here. Finally, as I've been bigging up the role of and the influence of scrutiny in this budget debate, I'd like you all to check your emails from yesterday, please, for the annual scrutiny survey, which would take only a few minutes of your time. This has been an extraordinary year for Scrutiny, as for everything else. We really need to get your impressions of how Scrutiny has responded during these exceptional times. Thank you.
Councillor McCabe.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I've been involved in health and adult social care for 35 years, and it's something that is really precious to me. I think it's something that demonstrates a compassionate society. And I've seen lots of people, including myself, hold the role of cabinet member for adult social care. And I'm really delighted that we have Councillor Lanning in that role, because to me, she epitomises what is required. She is caring and compassionate. She was brought up in Merton and knows and understands the people of Merton. She was educated at one of our excellent local schools. And I know that going forward, she will always stick up for the people of Merton. She will, as she already has demonstrated, support our local hospital at St Helier, and she will want to address and tackle the scourge of health inequalities. She wants to support the disadvantaged, and what a contrast between that and the Tories, because earlier this evening we heard the leader say that he thinks we should leave decisions about the future of hospitals to the doctors, to the clinicians. In other words, doctor knows best. Well, I would just suggest that you tell that to the parents at Shrewsbury and Telford Hospital, at the Alderhay Children's Hospital, at the Stafford Hospital, at the Bristol Heart Hospital. Doctors didn't know best there, and they don't always know best when it comes to addressing health inequalities. Because if they did, they wouldn't dream of moving a hospital away from a disadvantaged area to Belmont in Surrey. And, you know, I know there are people who suggest that perhaps the leader of the Tory group has ambitions to go and serve out in Surrey, and maybe that's what motivates him. But I have no idea whether that's right or wrong. But what I do know is that he has betrayed the people of Merton, he has let down the people of Merton, and he refuses to stick up for the people of Merton. And I think the people of Cannon Hill will give him a very clear answer to his approach to looking after the people of this community that we all serve. So I'm delighted that Councillor Lanning is responsible for these areas, because I know from working with her, from observing her, that she will always do the right thing. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Councillor Dean.
Madam Mayor, thank you very much. Pollution exceeds legal limits in Merton, and this Labour Council has no policy to remove it. The situation may be worsening, showing that the Labour Party has fogged up the borough since they got power back in 2010. And the latest Labour wheeze, which does nothing for the lungs of the young, is to tax parked cars. Their own figures prove if all of the vehicles in all of the CPZs vanished overnight, greenhouse gases would fall by just 1%. And as the borough traffic is not driven by Merton residents, this parking tax will not purify the air either. Trees are needed to provide oxygen. Volunteers have been planting these continuously, whilst Merton Labour have been felling them. As a Labour cabinet member said, trees are a distraction. The only thing Labour councillors love is raising taxes for all. The reason trees are
You have a minute remaining.
is because Labour can't tax them. What are the results of this harsh Labour council? Higher taxes confirmed tonight, making the poor poorer, toxic air as well, and the tearing up of greenery as cars don't disappear, they move from road to formerly green gardens. It's time, Madam Mayor, for a Tory Merton. Conservatives conserve. We will protect all green spaces from Labour's cement. We will plant trees by the thousand year after year with, for the first time in a decade, an actual council tree budget. We will replace tarmac verges with verdant grass. Merton, under Conservatives, will revert to a green and pleasant land that residents desire. Madam Mayor, for those watching council meetings online, residents see Labour politicians smiling and gesticulating like clowns when green corridors and trees are slain. It's time to put the clown suits away. Vote blue, go green. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Councillor Cowper. Councillor Cowper.
Sorry about that, Madam Mayor. Thank you very much. It's a year since the nightmare of COVID-19 started to unfold. It's been a year of restricted freedoms and a year of not being able to see our friends and families. But this year we have also seen our amazing community spirit here in Merton. We've seen people coming together and the council working closely with our voluntary partners to keep people safe, to keep families fed, to keep businesses supported, to help people in need. In my work of Canada, our residents have been able to make use
You have a minute remaining.
of the amazing, of the amazing green spaces and parks that we have that were kept open during the pandemic so we could get fresh air and exercise. But Madam Mayor, the council's immediate reaction doing whatever it takes to look after people has not been matched by the government. These are the costs of COVID. There is nearly £10 million in shortfall between what the council has spent and what the government has reimbursed. Madam Mayor, every year in my time as a councillor, we have
Councillor Ormerod.
made difficult decisions. Right.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd like to take this opportunity as Shadow Cabinet Member for Children and Young People to talk about the incredible young people across our borough who have faced the most challenging of times. These young people are our future, and with not being able to go to school, meet with their friends, play with their friends, and essentially lose all the normal structure of their daily lives will have a significant impact on these most precious people, our children. Schools will begin reopening on Monday next week, and I expect there will be an increase of children who will have had an impact on their mental health. I therefore ask that there is a renewed focus on children's mental health concerns and work towards preventative health schemes at this time when it is highly likely to be a significant increase in those children who require assistance. It's a good reminder to remember that daily routine of lockdown for children should be to get outside, exercise, call a friend, eat well, and sleep well. Sadly, this won't be possible for all our children, and we need to do whatever we can to help them. We need to be investing more in children's active sport and consider opportunities for further use of the borough's green spaces to achieve this goal. I'll therefore be requesting at the next CYP to set up a task group in order to do everything we can to assist children who may be struggling with their mental health. Every avenue of possibility needs to be considered to do what we can for our children, our future. I'd also like to draw attention to the really poor timing of the council to contact schools across the borough, asking head teachers to encourage staff, pupils and parents to not use cars to get to school. Furthermore, some schools will be having ANPR cameras fitted and cars entering school zones will start receiving penalties as early as next week. I'd have thought at this current point in time, everything possible should be done to get children into school safely, and to encourage public transport rather than cars is ill-judged and mistimed, particularly when some schools have already advised parents and staff members not to use public transport as part of their own risk assessment. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Councillor Bakari.
Madam Mayor, our amendments 3, 4 and 5 are about planning for the future for our young, our most vulnerable and our carers. It's about using evidence to best look after our communities in the most cost-effective way. As a teacher, I saw how life-changing pupil premium and universal free school meals for Key Stage 1 children was. Marcus Rashford shamed the government's lack of compassion on free school meals during the school holidays. But we were humbled by the actions of mutual aid groups and the generosity of the people of Merton. By voting for this amendment, we can make real differences to the most vulnerable children in our borough. When I ran a breakfast club, I saw the difference it made to a child's mental health and physical health. But don't just take my word for it. Let's gather the evidence from a pilot free breakfast club scheme funded from the Balancing Budget Reserve and voluntary donations sought from the residents and businesses who've already shown how they're willing to help their communities. There's some worrying savings being made on children's centres, adult social care, and most worryingly, the Dementia Hub. A highly praised Merton service, a great example of how to care in the community. There's no evidence that a Zoom meeting can replace a centre of comfort and safety. We asked these cuts are reviewed and agreed at a relevant scrutiny panel prior to implementation. Finally, many young people are worried about their future, and Councillor Fraser, council officers have highlighted the need to improve intervention to minimise the risk of harm to children from criminal exploitation. We can send you the report. We also want to make sure that Apprenticeship Levy monies are not sent back to the Treasury. That's also a waste of money. And young people who can finally find a home have selective licensing scheme to provide support in the rental private sector. We ask you to vote for these amendments, an evidence-based budget that looks after the pennies as well as the communities we serve. Thank you.
Councillor Quilliam.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I want to join others in commending Councillor Byers and colleagues in the Cabinet, as well as Caroline, for the budget we have tonight. This year has been a difficult one for everyone, and I can't imagine how it must have been putting together this budget while responding to the pandemic, wading through the fog that is left over our finances, and the drip of last-minute funding decisions from the government. I don't know how anyone could listen to what Caroline Holland had to say about the challenges the Council is facing, and think it's a good idea to raid our balancing the budget reserve for £100,000, or in the case of the Tories, £500,000. I know why. The Lib Dems want to pretend we don't care, and the Tories want to pretend we've done nothing to help local businesses. But it's not true. It's just not true. Nor is it business as usual. None of this is business as usual. This is a global crisis that's landed at our door. And it's thanks to the good financial management of this Labour Council over the last decade, and thanks to the hard work of this Labour Council, that we've weathered it as well as we have. They've criticised our priorities, but neither party has offered up a single cut to council spending. Every bit of new spending adds to the deficit we could face next year. The Conservatives here want to pretend that both the council tax increase and cuts to services are somehow the fault of this council, when it's clear that it's the coronavirus and the hard work of the council to respond to it that have cost us. Councillor Owen Breed has mentioned former chairs of the LGA. I want to read this from the current chair of the LGA, Conservative chair of the LGA, after today's budget by the Chancellor. He says, we continue to call on the government to meet in full all cost pressures and income losses incurred by councils as a result of the pandemic. That's after today's budget. He says further action is also desperately needed to immediately shore up social care services and to secure the long-term future of care and support. So there we are, clear and unequivocal. The government haven't done enough. More specifically on parking charges. I accept it's possible that Councillor Welton is going to exchange all that parking charge money for gold coins and sleep on it like Smile the Dragon, but it just seems unlikely. Those charges are focused on helping change behaviour, and any money will go into the transport budget, focused on the council's priorities, on freedom passes, on potholes, and yes, on action to support active travel. So in Merton, we have a council that's helping and working with our local businesses, stepping in to provide free school meals when the Tories wouldn't, providing council tax support to over 12,000 people when they need it most. And that is genuinely committed to tackling climate change. We have a Labour council and councillors that have worked with residents and our voluntary sector to get us through this pandemic. In short, we have the Labour
Councillor
council.
Andrew Howard.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Under Labour, Merton Council has become a council that does things to just checking I'm not on mute there, has done things to its residents, not for them. And thanks to the national press, the whole country knows it. This isn't the publicity that our proud borough needs, but let's face it, Labour lashing out at people who don't vote Labour. It's hardly headline news. So what's the real news? The real news is Labour systematically forcing through petty savings that only diminish the quality of life of the people who do vote Labour, of the very people who put their faith in Labour for support. Let's look at three vital Merton community projects whose all particularly reach out to those who lack opportunity, projects from which Labour has gratuitously cut vital funding. First, Merton Music Foundation. Their mission, I quote, "We're striving to ensure that barriers such as disability, ethnicity, and household income do not prevent any Merton child from making music with us." Funding cut, 23,000. Second, Morden Little League, one of your charities, Madam Mayor. Their profile, quote, "We run on the dedication and graft of many hardworking people. The emphasis is on mass participation rather than elitism, on enthusiasm and endeavour rather than ability." Funding cut 9,000 and now Dean's City Farm. Quote, "We teach the local community about the rural environment. We have a riding school offering affordable lessons to the local community." Funding cut 10,000. Easy numbers to add up, but for the benefit of Councillor Ellison, who at one point mistakenly declared the council bankrupt, the total comes to just £42,000. But at what cost to the community? But of course, the key calculation for Labour is a political one. Tell voters the cuts were forced by the Tory government, even while Merton's accounts are in fact closing with multi-million-pound surpluses. This is cynical stuff. Now that is headline news. Hold the front page. Thank you.
Councillor Curtin.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. As a former nurse, I have been amazed by the response of the council during the pandemic crisis. The work being done by local teams to get huge numbers of people tested in Pollard's Hill or Wimbledon Park. The enormous effort encouraging communities across the borough to take up vaccination offer. Even more amazing is the support the council has given, working with local partners and voluntary organisations to keep people informed and to make sure no families go hungry. Merton Council has truly done whatever it takes to look after the residents we all represent. I want to thank the council for the amazing work they have done. Care for the elderly is one of the council's highest priorities, and I am very proud to play my part through my work in Fish. It is clear the way people access support they require has been changing over the years, and I am pleased that the council continues to do so much to find out what people need. The council has always made it a point to work together with service providers and service users to understand their real needs. Madam Mayor, every year we are forced to find ways to protect our most vulnerable people, as we are given less and less money by the government, and now the costs of COVID. But I know that the protection of our most vulnerable and care for all our communities runs through this budget that we see tonight. I commend the budget to you, Madam Mayor. Thank you.
Councillor Adam Bush.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Madam Mayor, having a successful high street is a hub of life and a source of local pride for all residents, and particularly in Merton. A struggling high street can give a whole area a depressing feeling. Our amendment tonight, by creating a high street improvement fund, starts the journey to get our business community in Merton thriving once again. Unfortunately, Madam Mayor, the world has changed, including how people shop. 30% of non-food purchasing is now done online. But just as people are falling out of love with traditional big retails, the same people crave human environments and useful experiences. From food to fashion to technology done right, local high streets and town centres of all varieties will still create the energy that we're all attracted to. Madam Mayor, we are often reminded by this administration that they are like the widely criticised parking charges in Merton is anything but business-like. The simple economic model of supply and demand should surely make things even for even this administration to understand. The extortionate visitor parking charges will discourage residents from shopping in Merton and take them elsewhere. Madam Mayor, we are hugely grateful to the Chancellor Rishi Sunak, who has announced today a £5 billion in restart grants for high street shops and hospitality firms, ensuring the hardest hit businesses have the support they need through the next stage of recovery. I was disappointed that this administration did nothing last year whilst other councils chose to create their own business support scheme. Madam Mayor, tonight the administration has the chance to kickstart our local economic recovery. We urge them to support our amendment to support high streets, which will ensure firms can reopen and get going again. Thank you.
Councillor Monday.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and officers for everything they've done during this pandemic, including testing over 10,000 residents in my ward of Pollard's Hill to help cut the spread of COVID-19. This is another year Labour's Merton Council has tabled a balanced budget, and another year we present a budget that continues to make Merton a great place for families. And what a difference a year makes. Last year we met face-to-face in the chamber, now we meet online. Councillor Anne Brittas was seeing yet another year as Merton Labour's most successful leader with a decade of delivery. And now Councillor Allison has filled those shoes and is championing closing the gap between the east and the west of our borough. And the Lib Dems had one more member on their benches, and now we do. And what has not changed is yet again, central government is failing to take advantage of the talents of this local authority and local authorities up and down the country. This is not only my argument, it's also presented by Councillor James Jameson, Chairman of the Local Government Association, in his response to today's budget. We've already heard from my colleague, Councillor Lanning, that total spending power since 2010 has decreased, not increased. We've heard from our Section 151 officer, Caroline Holland, how yet another deferral of a multi-year funding settlement makes it challenging for planning in the medium term. We've heard the council has spent over £30 million to fight COVID on every street and doorstep in our borough. We've received 21 million from the government to date, around 9 million yet less than what was promised. That could pay for over 300 carers for a year. Madam Mayor, I've covered the past and the present. What about the near future? I'm proud that when I call residents as a Labour councillor to get Mayor Sadiq Khan and Leona Cooper, our Assembly member, re-elected, I can do so with my head held up high in knowing that I'm part of a Labour council and a party that is working towards a Merton for the many and not just for the few. I commend this budget. Thank you very much.
Councillor Williams.
Madam Mayor, our amendment sets aside £500,000 from reserves to create a high street recovery and improvement fund. We asked ourselves, how have Labour transformed Merton's town centres in the last 30 years? Well, they haven't. The giveaway in Wimbledon is the site designations P3 and P4. It was a Conservative administration that planned and delivered P1, Centre Court, and P2, turning Victoria Crescent into a piazza and the surrounding buildings. The 1990 Labour Council immediately stopped a new civic hall on P4, and ideas and approvals for P3 have been deliberately run into the sand. Don't ask about the derelict community centre site. Wimbledon is just a cash cow. But at a time of recession from 2007, Who regenerated Rains Park Shopping Centre and the shopping parades in Lower Morden and Wimbledon Chase, and got a station built in Eastfields to boost Mitcham Town Centre? And who started up the More Morden project? A Conservative administration. And what's happened in Morden since? And how has the council leveraged its land holdings and influence with City Hall and TfL? Well, I'll remind you again. £54.5 million was available from the GLA Land Fund for Morden regeneration, but with no progress, it's been withdrawn. Merton failed to bid for funds for Morden, from the Future High Streets Fund, with others getting £1 million or £11 million. This tonight's a golden opportunity here to show that Labour really know what it means to be businesslike and vote for this amendment.
Councillor Welton.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. For many of us, the last time we had an in-person meeting of this council was last year's budget. Shortly afterwards, the country was plunged into lockdown. As a council, it meant changing the way we work and having to adapt rapidly in addressing the pandemic, which has been our overriding priority. Despite promises made by Robert Jenrick that the authority would be compensated in full, of course, like many of their promises, there was another one broken, and we found ourselves 10 million down on where we would have been as a council if the pandemic had never happened. But despite the many broken promises, as a council, we rose to the task in supporting communities in the borough on what has been a traumatic year, but also in protecting the most vulnerable people. I would like to take this opportunity of saying thank you to Merton officers for their work, but also the work of the voluntary sector, mutual aid groups, the local NHS, and the whole community in Merton, all coming together at the most difficult times. And just a few weeks ago, in my own ward of Pollard's Hill, following the outbreak of the South African variant. I would particularly like to give a special mention to the housing needs team led by Steve Langley for managing to house all rough sleepers, who are some of our most vulnerable in the borough. Merton continues to have the lowest number in London, housed in temporary accommodation at just over 200, though I fear that when the eviction ban ends, that figure may well rise. The right to have a roof over their head is a basic right, and it's why building more homes will continue to be a priority for the administration, including social homes for rent. On active travel, we have introduced measures to encourage active travel, including walking and cycling. The introduction of 26 school streets throughout the borough on top of the existing 3 has seen Merton have one of the highest number in London, but also removing toxic vehicles, improving air quality, and encouraging children to walk and cycle to school. I would also like to pay tribute to the many people in the community who have campaigned, many very passionately, who have in raising awareness and rightfully pushing for the council to take action. We have made a start, but recognise there's still a long way to go, and we will continue to implement measures in the years ahead, including tackling vehicle idling, but also on enforcement. We have, as a council, introduced further cycling lanes and new low traffic neighbourhoods to encourage a modal shift to walking and cycling, but also have cleaner air and reducing emissions. Even myself, who had hardly rode a bike since leaving school nigh on 30 years ago, have become an active cyclist, which I would have thought unimaginable a year ago. Many others have followed a similar path in getting on their bike, but long-term behavioural change is needed, which is why we have introduced emissions-based charging, opposed by both the Tories and Lib Dems on this council. Whilst the opposition may have an unwillingness to deal with polluting Chelsea tractors, we on this side support measures to make the polluter pay, which will see 50% of residents paying the same for parking permits. And over the next year, we will implement further measures as part of long-term sustainable transport plan. This includes 20 bike hangars, electric charging for electric cars from lampposts, with the first 20 installed in the next month, with plans for a further 60 by May. We will also work collectively through London councils on bike hire scheme, as it needs a coordinated London-wide approach and not a free-for-all. And as Cabinet member, I have also been proud to become the first lead member for the climate emergency. For the council, we're working towards achieving net zero procurements, investments in carbon offsetting, which includes making us carbon neutral by 2030 and the borough by 2050. We have also received over £500,000 for the public sector decarbonisation grant scheme and low carbon skills to fund the decarbonisation of 6 sites, and we will continue to submit further bids over the next year. I'm disappointed that the government didn't put further money in. I ask you all to support this budget. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Councillor Barlow.
Madam Mayor, there was a rare moment of unity at our health scrutiny panel back in January. On proposed saving on daycare provision, members agreed that the Cabinet should think again. The Council's own equality assessment acknowledged that any review could cause anxiety for service users. We are not opposed to a review of daycare services, but any such review should start with how you want to improve the standards delivered, not how much money you want to save. There could hardly be a worse time to be looking to make a financial saving from day centres. As we near the end of a period of real loneliness and isolation for many, these facilities could provide one of the few opportunities for vulnerable and older people to socialise in the future. I don't know if it's reassuring or concerning for those of us in opposition that the Cabinet take the same approach to scrutiny from their own side as they do to ours. Simply ignore it. They have an opportunity tonight to put this right, but I'm sure they won't, because for Merton Labour, decline is treated as simply inevitable. Councillor Allison speaks of recovery, yet brings forward no measures to deliver it. Whilst truly business-like councils look to ways to grow their boroughs out of the pandemic, Merton Labour falls back into their usual routine.
Have a minute left.
Ask for more money, then fail to spend it well. Blame the government. Take more money off residents in exchange for less. Blame the government. But credit's where it's due. We've seen a new approach from Councillor McCabe tonight. Blame the doctors. Whilst his group leadership nodded enthusiastic support, once the so-called party of the NHS. That aside, the top line to take from Merton Labour tonight was clearly 10 years of Conservative government. A history lesson for Councillor Aaron Brittis and his colleagues. How about 26 of the past 30 years of a Labour-led Merton, and half of those with a Labour government? That's a lot of experience on the Labour benches. Many have been councillors for the near 3 decades of Labour-run Merton. Take some responsibility for once. Ask why Morden still hasn't been regenerated. Ask why St Helier has not had the investment it's long needed. Ask why you're now balancing the books by cutting services. Madam Mayor, the problem with Labour Merton is eventually they will run out of other people's money and they will run out of excuses.
Councillor Akingina.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Madam Mayor, I would like to start by saying thank you to the directors and officers and also the council staff and also the former cabinet members and the present cabinet members and councillors. It's been a difficult year to try and support the community. Thank you. Madam Mayor, this year has been an unbelievable one. People have been worried and are still worried. In most cases, they don't know whether they're coming or going. It's been hard. With the news of a possible release of the lockdown, the community needs to know that they will be safe. The major concerns are, will there be enough police? Will there be around to support them in any situation that may rise? I have to say that I'm worried about what the impact it will have on our community safety and resources if we lose more funding from the government. There is already a shortfall in this year's budget for both Merton and the Mayor of London. The government has not paid us the full cost of COVID. So we are faced with COVID cuts to policing or COVID council tax for policing or both, a bit of both. Sadiq is being forced to raise his council tax to pay for policing. And if we do not get the money we need, we will be forced to make savings too. These COVID cuts, and they are COVID cuts, COVID taxes are not fair in our community, but they are the government's choice, not ours. The present government has not been consistent in their decision making. We can only hope and pray that they consider the community, especially the deprived areas. At this present time, the police themselves are trying to build confidence between them and the communities in an attempt to support, encourage, and keep the communications channels flowing. Whilst trying to address these concerns, we are aware that the lockdown has heightened issues, e.g. domestic violence, where various groups have been working hard to support those who need it most. And I must admit that sitting there listening to the opposition, the Conservatives going on about the government announced, it's easy for people to announce things, but have they not heard that action speaks louder than words? Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Councillor Holmes.
Madam Mayor, thank you. This evening, we've heard a lot about the commitment and the compassion of the Labour group and this administration And Madam Mayor, I don't doubt that. And we've heard a lot of stories this evening to reinforce that commitment and that compassion. And in good times, that's possibly enough to allow you to muddle through. But these are not good times. And in these times, commitment is not enough. The challenges are too great. And only Councillor Brunt has really addressed the issue of leadership. The tough decisions that needed to be made, they're your decisions. The responsibility that needs to be taken, it's your responsibility. There are 200,000 people who live in this borough and they could not care less about the dodging and about the excuses. They care, Madam Mayor, about their future. This administration was elected to lead and you have not led. These decisions are your decisions. The general fund is up by £2 million in the reserves. The usable reserves up £20 million over 2 years. £8.4 million of future reserves have been brought forward but not used. We've heard this evening the government have given £5 million more than the money that has been spent on COVID. And yet, despite this, you're cutting services. You are cutting services. You're putting up taxes. You are putting up taxes. And we've heard this evening new lows, Madam Mayor, blaming doctors, saying that anybody would want services to wither. Madam Mayor, we've heard about recovery this evening. The first thing that needs to recover is this administration. We've given you ideas, we've given you policies, and it's now for you to decide whether you will pick them up. Madam Mayor, we can all blame other people. Blaming other people is very easy until you wake up one day and you realise there's no one else to blame other than yourself.
Councillor Pritchard.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. There's a lot to speak to tonight, but I'm just going to, as I'm current member for the local economy, I'm going to restrict myself to that. I'm also not going to repeat what Director Holland has covered in terms of what grants have been provided and how, but I will state that given the complexity of these payment schemes, the speed and efficacy of their delivery has been truly phenomenal. And as such, I'd like to thank all the officers involved and also our colleagues and friends of the Merton Chamber of Commerce, DWP and the business improvement districts. The work of the community in facing this crisis has been incredible. The list of grants Director Holland spoke of demonstrated that to date the majority of the response has been in accordance with central government direction focused on business ratepayers and specific sectors. Too many businesses have not received the financial support they need because the support from central government has been too little and too restrictive. That needs to change, Madam Mayor, because though we hope that 2021 will see the end of the public health crisis, it's only at best going to be the midpoint through the economic crisis. A recent Oxford economics paper that we and other South London boroughs commissioned stated that the economic contraction we're experiencing is the worst in 300 years, with the South London economy more vulnerable than average, with younger, self-employed, part-time, less qualified workers and ethnic minorities disproportionately hit by this economic crisis. For us in Merton, to put some figures on it, that means about 5,000 jobs or perhaps over expected to be lost over this 2-year period. That's quite phenomenal given the size of our resident population. And the total number of jobs not expected to return to pre-pandemic levels until 2023. I've talked about a tsunami wave of unemployment and people have looked at me askance, but that is quite correct. In response to this, I agree that the Conservative group are quite right. A way out of this crisis does necessitate a vision. And this is why the London Recovery Group on its September meeting agreed 8 missions to facilitate this vision, 4 of which were focused on the economy: good work for all, digital access for all, Green New Deal and high streets for all, much like what has been talked about this evening by the Conservative group. If only they'd done their research to realise that vision had already existed. Missions like these will provide a framework that Merton, alongside our partners across South London, can work to and will, in concert with the Merton consultation that we intend to deliver, provide a clear roadmap for a way out of this economic crisis. Compare that vision, Madam Mayor, to the one that was absent in today's Tory budget. The Chancellor had the opportunity to put us on the road to recovery and right the wrongs of the last decade.
A minute remaining.
Barely a mention of the NHS or social care, no mention of schools or restoring Britain's high streets, which was mentioned by the group, of course, and no action to fix failing job schemes like Kickstart, and no new support for the unemployed. The same old Tories with the wrong priorities. 500 million capital spending cut just when we need it, a pay freeze for key workers who got us through this crisis, and a £20 a week cut to universal credit for millions of families just when unemployment will peak at over 2 million. Sunak's budget was ideological and a roadmap to yesterday. Councillor Byers, on the other hand, is pragmatic, moderate, and despite all the cost of COVID, will lay the foundation for a fairer future. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Councillor Kohler.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And so the ritual begins in earnest once more. Councillor Councillor Allison tells us we're businesslike, and the Cabinet dutifully joins in, although fewer of them this year than last. Coalitions are tricky, Councillor Allison. However, no one in my group has any illusions about the very real obstacles you and the council are facing following Tory cuts and now this terrible pandemic. Not that has stopped my Tory colleagues splashing out, of course. It seems the trees Councillor Dean wants to plant are no other than magic money trees, most of which have already taken root in Councillor McLean's imagination. No sooner had Councillor McLean pledged 1 million of Merton's reserves on the Tories' initial budget amendments this afternoon, he issued a revision, raising his stake to 1.2 million. And that's all the Tory budget amendment is, of course, a stake in a game of bluff. With the exception of motherhood and apple pie, not much is missing. And yes, it will look very good on your leaflets and your posts on Nextdoor. It's just a cobbled together wish list, like your hurriedly revised costings this afternoon.
Minute remaining.
Contrast, if you will, the Tories' formless meanderings with the Lib Dem specific and realistic proposals. The difference is, of course, we want to get our amendments accepted. I'm grateful to the Labour group for agreeing to one of them, which is why we will not vote against your budget. Despite its lack of strategy, it would of course be churlish to vote against the Tories' wish list, despite the dissembling of Councillor Gretton. As Councillor Welton noted, neither I nor any of my group have ever supported the administration's increase in parking charges across Wimbledon and Rains Park, which is, as we christened it, a tax on not voting Labour. And finally, Councillor Southgate, our amendments are separate to maximise the chance of some getting through, when other parties, such as your own, cannot support all of them. That's why they're separate. That's why you have to vote individually. Thank you.
Final speaker, seconder to the main report, Councillor Stringer.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Almost exactly a year ago, we were all in the council chamber together, debating some odd amendments to the balanced budget that we were presenting then. Had we known then what we know now, I'd like to think that we would all instead have been jointly calling for additional funding for local authorities to support residents and businesses through the oncoming pandemic, like Labour colleagues have been demanding today. Madam Mayor, it's a year on, and here we all are, now in our kitchens and living rooms, yet once again, we're debating some odd amendments. Madam Mayor, I'm happy that a number of the proposals are about our work with children and young people. I'm always happy when people have ideas about how to address the challenges facing young people, particularly those who are extremely vulnerable at the best of times, let alone during a lockdown. But Councillor Fraser has already discussed how some of the amendments from the Lib Dem seem to ignore the excellent work we already do on crucial issues, like supporting young people at risk of sexual exploitation, and how we already ensure that alternative education provision used by Merton schools is high quality. This is all within our current budget and service plans. Their proposal to bring in additional funds to fund breakfast clubs is, on the face of it, attractive. Of course it is. But while I think we've all been impressed by the generosity of Merton residents through the pandemic, we have to ask ourselves, do we think that we could consistently raise the estimated £6 million a year we think it would cost to run breakfast clubs for any child eligible for free school meals? To commit to a pilot without clear plan to fund it in the long run would be irresponsible to schools and to the children. Madam Mayor, the best way to address many of the issues facing children and young people is to address child poverty. We've had a 25% increase in the numbers of children eligible for free school meals due to their family's income. That's a 25% rise over the past 12 months. We should all be worrying about that huge increase because we know that growing up poor makes life so very much harder and can damage children's health, mental health, outcomes and future prospects. We should all be worrying about the increase in complex cases that our children's social workers are seeing as families struggle through lockdown, As corporate parents, we should be worrying about the young people who are leaving care and entering the job market at a time when unemployment is high and rising, as Councillor Pritchard has pointed out. I'm happy that we're doing what we can to address poverty and increase opportunities, not just paying lip service about recovery, but taking real actions to help residents recover their livelihoods. By using the Kickstart programme to offer 46 new jobs to young unemployed people in council services, giving real opportunities to our local young residents, on top of the 30 young people we currently have on apprenticeships in Merton. And by committing to working for all contract staff being paid the London living wage, which is why we are happy to agree to the Lib Dem Amendment, making this commitment, which is already in the plan, clear. Madam Mayor, while we are doing what we can, we need the government to step up. They need to step up to provide certainty about how we are meant to deal with the fact that delivering on the legal commitments to young people with special educational needs and disabilities means spending more than we receive in the dedicated schools grant. They need to step up to recognise that in a time of rising poverty, early help for families, those at risk of domestic abuse and mental health breakdowns, has to be a priority. Without more funding, we're going to be forced to look at reducing all but our statutory duties, and that, Madam Mayor, would be disastrous for these families. These are just in the areas I'm responsible for. Other colleagues have talked about the government's complete abdication of responsibility on adult social care funding and other issues. Madam Mayor, we are doing what we can, and I'm proud of the work of Councillor Byers, Caroline Holland, and all involved from Merton on delivering this budget, and I ask you to support it. I only wish the government worked as hard for our disadvantaged residents. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
We have now gone through the list of expected speakers, members wanting to speak. If we have finished the debate, we will move on to the votes. We will take each one of the amendments in the order in which they are moved. I call for a roll call vote on the Conservative budget amendment.
Good evening, councillors. I'm now going to call your names. When I do, please indicate whether you're voting for, against, or not voting on the Conservative amendment. Councillor Akagina?
Against.
Forgive me, I'll turn my speakers on so I can hear what you're saying. Would help, wouldn't it? I'll read that again. Councillor Akagina?
Against.
Councillor Alan Brittas?
Against.
Councillor Allison?
Against.
Councillor Anderson? Councillor Anderson? Councillor Bailey?
For.
Councillor Barlow?
For.
Councillor Bembo?
For.
Thank you. Councillor Bakari?
For.
Councillor Braund?
Against.
Councillor Brunt?
Against.
Councillor Adam Bush?
For.
Councillor Omar Bush?
For.
Councillor Butler?
Against.
Councillor Byers?
Against.
Councillor Christie?
Against.
Councillor Chung?
Against.
Councillor Cooper Marbia?
Against.
Councillor Cowper?
Against.
Councillor Crowe?
For.
Councillor Curtin?
Against.
Councillor Dean?
For.
Councillor Draper?
Against.
Councillor Fairclough?
For.
Councillor Foley?
Not voting.
Councillor Fraser?
Against.
Councillor Gould?
For.
Councillor Gretton?
For.
Councillor Henry?
Against.
Councillor Holden?
For.
Councillor Holmes?
For.
Councillor Andrew Howard?
For.
Councillor Janice Howard?
For.
Councillor Kirby?
Against.
Councillor Kohler?
For.
Councillor Lanning?
Against.
Councillor Latif?
For.
Councillor Macaulay?
Against.
Councillor Makin?
Against.
Councillor McCabe? Councillor McCabe?
Sorry, against.
Councillor McGrath?
For.
Councillor McLean?
For.
Councillor Moulton?
For.
Councillor Mundy?
Against.
Councillor Ormerod.
For.
Councillor Pearce.
Against.
Councillor Pritchard.
Against.
Councillor Quilliam.
Against.
Councillor Simpson.
For.
Councillor Skeet.
Against.
Councillor Southgate.
Not voting.
Councillor Stanford. Councillor Stanford.
Against.
Councillor Stringer.
Against.
Councillor Ward.
Against.
Councillor Welton.
Against.
Councillor Wilkinson.
Not voting.
Councillor Williams.
For.
Councillor Dehaney.
Against.
Councillor Kenny.
Not voting.
Thank you.
Sorry, Chair. Sorry, Chair. Stan Anderson here. I couldn't get. I replied, but I didn't. You couldn't hear me.
Councillor Anderson, were you voting
Against.
Thank you.
Okay.
For 23, against 31, not voting for, the amendment is lost. I call for a roll call on the Liberal Democrat Amendment 1.
Again, councillors, when I call your name, please indicate whether you're voting for, against, or not voting on the first Liberal Democrat Amendment. Councillor Akagina.
For.
Councillor Alan Brittis.
For.
Councillor Allison.
For.
Councillor Anderson.
For.
Councillor Bailey.
For.
Councillor Barlow.
For.
Councillor Bembo.
For.
Councillor Bakari.
For.
Councillor Braund.
For.
Councillor Brunt.
For.
Councillor Adam Bush.
For.
Councillor Omar Bush.
For.
Councillor Butler.
For.
Councillor Byers.
For.
Councillor Christie.
For.
Councillor Chung.
For.
Councillor Cooper Marbia.
For.
Councillor Cowper. Councillor Crowe.
For.
Councillor Curtin. Councillor Curtin. Councillor Dean.
For.
Councillor
Sorry.
Draper. Sorry, Councillor Curtin. For. Councillor Draper.
For.
Councillor Fairclough.
For.
Councillor Foley.
For.
Councillor Fraser.
For.
Councillor Gould.
For.
Councillor Gretton.
For.
Councillor Henry. Councillor Holden.
For.
Councillor Holmes.
For.
Councillor Andrew Howard.
For.
Councillor Janice Howard.
For.
Councillor Kirby.
For.
Councillor Kohler.
For.
Councillor Lanning.
For.
Councillor Latif.
For.
Councillor Macaulay.
For.
Councillor Makin.
For.
Councillor McCabe.
For.
Councillor McGrath.
For.
Councillor McLean.
For.
Councillor Moulton. Councillor Mundy.
For.
Councillor Ormerod.
For.
Councillor Pearce.
For.
Councillor Pritchard.
For.
Councillor Quilliam.
For.
Councillor Simpson.
For.
Councillor Skeet.
For.
Councillor Southgate.
For.
Councillor Stanford. Councillor Stringer. Councillor Stanford.
For.
Councillor Ward.
For.
Councillor Welton.
For.
Councillor Wilkinson.
For.
Councillor Williams,
For.
Councillor Dehaney,
For.
the Mayor, Councillor Kenny.
Not voting.
I'm not sure that I was unmuted, so I'm not sure you would have heard that I said.
didn't. Councillor Morton, for.
Thank you.
And I think Councillor Stanford came in when you're saying my name, but I would have voted for as well.
Yes, thank you. Yes, I got you both. Thank you, Councillor Stringer.
For the Liberal Democrat Amendment 1, for 54, against 0, not voting 1. The amendment is carried. I call for a roll call on the Liberal Democrat Amendment 2.
Councillor Akagina.
Against.
Councillor Alan Brittis.
Against.
Councillor Allison.
Against.
Councillor Anderson.
Against.
Councillor Bailey. For. Councillor Barlow.
For.
Councillor Bembo.
For.
Councillor Bakari.
For.
Councillor Braund.
Against.
Councillor Brunt.
Against.
Councillor Adam Bush.
For.
Councillor Omar Bush.
For.
Councillor Butler.
Against.
Councillor Byers.
Against.
Councillor Christie.
Against.
Councillor Chung.
Against.
Councillor Cooper Marbia.
Against.
Councillor Cowper.
Against.
Councillor Crowe.
For.
Councillor Curtin. Against. Councillor Dean.
For.
Councillor Draper.
Against.
Councillor Fairclough.
For.
Councillor Foley.
Not voting.
Councillor Fraser.
Against.
Councillor Gould.
For.
Councillor Gretton.
For.
Councillor Henry. Councillor Holden.
For.
Councillor Holmes.
For.
Councillor Andrew Howard.
For.
Councillor Janice Howard.
For.
Councillor Kirby.
Against.
Councillor Kohler.
For.
Councillor Lanning.
Against.
Councillor Latif.
For.
Councillor Macaulay.
Against.
Councillor Makin.
Against.
Councillor McCabe. Councillor McGrath.
For.
Councillor McLean.
For.
Councillor Moulton.
For.
Councillor Mundy.
Against.
Councillor Ormrod.
For.
Councillor Pearce.
Against.
Councillor Pritchard.
Leave things for the moment from behind.
Councillor Pritchard.
Against.
Councillor Quilliam. Councillor Simpson.
For.
Councillor Skeet. Councillor Southgate.
Voting.
Councillor Stanford.
Against.
Councillor Stringer.
Against.
Councillor Ward. Councillor Welton.
Against.
Councillor Wilkinson.
Not voting.
Councillor Williams.
For.
Councillor Dehaney. The Mayor, Councillor Kenny.
Not voting.
Excuse me, I said for.
Councillor Skeet, thank you.
The Liberal Democrat Amendment 2, for 24, against 28, not voting for. The amendment is lost. I call for a roll call vote on the Liberal Democrat Amendment 3.
Councillor Akagina.
Against.
Councillor Alan Brittis,
Against.
Councillor Allison,
Against.
Councillor Anderson,
Against.
Councillor Bailey,
For.
Councillor Barlow,
For.
Councillor Bembo,
For.
Councillor Bakari,
For.
Councillor Braund,
Against.
Councillor Brunt,
Against.
Councillor Adam Bush,
For.
Councillor Omar Bush, Councillor Butler,
Against.
Councillor Byers,
Against.
Councillor Christie,
Against.
Councillor Chung,
Against.
Councillor Cooper Marbia,
Against.
Councillor Cowper,
Against.
Councillor Crowe,
For.
Councillor Curtin,
Against.
Councillor Dean,
For.
Councillor Draper,
Against.
Councillor Fairclough,
For.
Councillor Foley,
Not voting.
Councillor Fraser,
Against.
Councillor Gould,
For.
Councillor Gretton,
For.
Councillor Henry, Councillor Holden,
For.
Councillor Holmes,
For.
Councillor Andrew Howard, Councillor Janice Howard,
For.
Councillor Kirby,
Against.
Councillor Kohler,
For.
Councillor Lanning,
Against.
Councillor Latif,
For.
Councillor Macaulay,
Against.
Councillor Makin,
Against.
Councillor McCabe,
Against.
Councillor McGrath,
For.
Councillor McLean,
For.
Councillor Moulton,
For.
Councillor Mundy,
Against.
Councillor Ormrod,
For.
Councillor Pearce,
Against.
Councillor Pritchard, Councillor Quilliam,
Against.
Councillor
For.
Sorry, I apologise. I've been put on mute. I'll go back and call Councillor Skeet again.
For. No, again. Sorry, again.
Councillor Southgate,
Not voting.
Councillor Stanford,
Against.
Councillor Stringer,
Against.
Councillor Ward,
Against.
Councillor Welton,
Against.
Councillor Wilkinson,
Not voting.
Councillor Williams,
For.
Councillor Dehaney,
Yes.
the Mayor.
Not voting.
May I check that my vote for was registered? Councillor Andrew Howard.
It is now.
The Liberal Democrat Amendment 3, for 23, against 29, not voting for. I call for a roll call vote on the Liberal Democrat Amendment 4.
Councillor Akagina,
Against.
Councillor Alan Brittis,
Against.
Councillor Allison,
Against.
Councillor Anderson, Councillor Bailey,
For.
Councillor Barlow,
For.
Councillor Bembo,
For.
Councillor Bakari,
For.
Councillor Braund,
Against.
Councillor Brunt,
Against.
Councillor Adam Bush,
For.
Councillor Omar Bush,
For.
Councillor Butler,
Against.
Councillor Byers,
Against.
Councillor Christie,
Against.
Councillor Chung,
Against.
Councillor Cooper Marbia,
Against.
Councillor Cowper,
Against.
Councillor Crowe,
For.
Councillor Curtin,
Against.
Councillor Dean,
For.
Councillor Draper,
Against.
Councillor Fairclough,
For.
Councillor Foley,
For.
Councillor Fraser,
Against.
Councillor Gould.
For.
Councillor Gretton.
For.
Councillor Henry. Councillor Holden.
For.
Councillor Holmes.
For.
Councillor Andrew Howard.
For.
Councillor Janice Howard.
For.
Councillor Kirby. Councillor Kohler.
For.
Councillor Lanning. Councillor
Against.
Latif.
For.
Councillor Macaulay.
Against.
Councillor Makin.
Against.
Councillor McCabe.
Against.
Councillor McGrath.
For.
Councillor McLean.
For.
Councillor Moulton.
For.
Councillor Mundy.
Against.
Councillor Ormrod.
For.
Councillor Pearce.
Against.
Councillor Pritchard. Councillor Quilliam.
Against.
Councillor Simpson.
For.
Councillor Skeet.
Against.
Councillor Southgate.
For.
Councillor Stanford.
Against.
Councillor Stringer.
Against.
Councillor Ward.
Against.
Councillor Welton.
Against.
Councillor Wilkinson.
For.
Councillor Williams.
For.
Councillor Dehaney.
Against.
The Mayor.
Not voting. Thank you. The Liberal Democrat Amendment 4, for 26, against 29, not voting 1. The amendment is lost. I call for a roll call on the Liberal Democrat Amendment 5.
Councillor Akagina.
Against.
Councillor Alan Brittis.
Against.
Councillor Allison.
Against.
Councillor Anderson. Councillor Bailey.
For.
Councillor Barlow.
For.
Councillor Bembo.
For.
Councillor Bakari.
For.
Councillor Braund.
Against.
Councillor Brunt.
Against.
Councillor Adam Bush.
For.
Councillor Omar Bush.
For.
Councillor Butler.
Against.
Councillor Byers.
Against.
Councillor Christie.
Against.
Councillor Chung.
Against.
Councillor Cooper Marbia.
Against.
Councillor Cowper.
Against.
Councillor Crowe.
For.
Councillor Curtin.
Against.
Councillor Dean.
For.
Councillor Draper.
Against.
Councillor Fairclough.
For.
Councillor Foley.
For.
Councillor Fraser.
Against.
Councillor Gould.
For.
Councillor Gretton.
For.
Councillor Henry. Councillor Holden.
For.
Councillor Holmes.
For.
Councillor Howard. Andrew Howard. Councillor Janice Howard. Councillor Kirby. Councillor Kohler.
For.
Councillor Lanning.
Against.
Councillor Latif.
For.
Councillor Macaulay.
Against.
Councillor Makin.
Against.
Councillor McCabe.
Against.
Councillor McGrath.
For.
Councillor McLean.
For.
Councillor Moulton.
For.
Councillor Mundy.
Against.
Councillor Ormrod.
For.
Councillor Pearce.
Against.
Councillor Pritchard. Councillor Quilliam. Councillor Simpson.
For.
Councillor Skeet.
Against.
Councillor Southgate.
For.
Councillor Stanford.
Against.
Councillor Stringer.
Against.
Councillor Ward.
Against.
Councillor
Hang on.
Welton.
Whoa.
Against.
Whoa.
Councillor Wilkinson.
Okay.
For.
Councillor Williams.
For.
Councillor Dehaney.
Paul Coley's getting really,
The Mayor.
he's really
Not
getting upset.
voting.
Because I haven't voted with him. He's been.
Right, again, Councillor Andrew Howard here. Someone tells me I wasn't heard voting.
No,
It was
you
to
were. I've got you.
Thank you.
Louise, sorry, Councillor Henry tells me she's been trying to vote against the last several amendments. Can you confirm if you've heard her?
I haven't heard her. I could take her on this one. I'm afraid it would be it's too late on the other ones that we've already declared.
Yeah, okay.
Would it be possible to say thank you after each vote so that people know whether they've been heard?
Yes, I suppose I can do that on the last one, Councillor Ellison.
Thank you, especially for the substantive one. I think that people need to know whether or not their vote has been counted.
The Liberal Democrat Amendment 5, for 25, against 28, not voting 1. The amendment is lost. We now turn our attention to a vote on the substantive budget report as amended. Councillor Allison, would you like to use your right to reply on the substantive motion?
No, thank you, Madam Mayor, but I would like to thank everybody for taking part this evening. It's been a very good debate. Thank you.
I now call for a recorded roll call vote to formally agree the main budget report as amended.
Councillor Akagina.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Allenbritis.
For.
Councillor Allison.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Anderson. Councillor Bailey.
Not voting.
Thank you. Councillor Barlow.
Against.
Thank you. Councillor Bembo.
Again.
Thank you. Councillor Bakari.
Not voting.
Thank you. Councillor Braund.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Brunt.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Bush.
Against.
Thank you. Councillor Omar Bush.
Against.
Thank you. Councillor Butler.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Byers.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Christie.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Chung.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Mabaya.
For.
Councillor, thank you. Councillor Cowper.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Crowe.
Against.
Thank you. Councillor Curtin. Councillor Curtin. I don't have that. Councillor Dean.
Against.
Thank you. Councillor Draper.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Fairclough.
Not voting.
Thank you. Councillor Foley.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Fraser.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Gould.
Not voting.
Thank you. Councillor Gretton.
Against.
Thank you. Councillor Henry. Don't have you, Councillor Henry. I'll move on. Councillor Holden.
Against.
Thank you. Councillor Holmes.
Against.
Thank you. Councillor Andrew Howard.
Against.
Thank you. Councillor Janice Howard.
Against.
Thank you. Councillor Kirby. For. Thank you. Councillor Kohler.
Not voting.
Thank you. Councillor Lanning. For. Thank you. Councillor Latif.
Against.
I couldn't.
Thank you. Councillor Macaulay.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Makin.
For.
Thank you. Councillor McCabe.
For.
Thank you. Councillor McGrath.
Not voting.
Thank you. Councillor McLean.
Against.
Thank you. Councillor Moulton.
Against.
Thank you. Councillor Mundy.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Ormrod.
Against.
Thank you. Councillor Pearce.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Pritchard.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Quilliam.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Simpson.
Against.
Thank you. Councillor Skeet.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Southgate.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Stanford.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Stringer. 4. Thank you. Councillor Ward.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Welton.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Wilkinson.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Williams.
Against.
Thank you. Councillor Dehaney.
4.
And the Mayor.
Not voting.
Officer, could I come in, please?
Councillor Curtin.
4.
4. Thank you.
Thank you.
The substantive motion as amended. For 32, against 17, not voting 1. The motion is carried. With no further business, I declare the meeting of the council closed.
Can't be
Thank
right,
you
Madam
very
Mayor.
much to everyone for your contribution and have a wonderful night's sleep. Good night.
Not voting
That
isn't
can't be
1.
right, Madam Mayor.
Not voting is not 1.
Sorry?
Not voting is about 6.
Sorry.
Abstentions.
Sorry, Councillor Alan Bridges, what did you say?
The abstentions are more than 1, I think.
The not voting 7. Sorry, did I say 1?
Yes. Thank you.
Beg your pardon. I beg your pardon. Well, good night, everybody.
Good night, Madam Mayor.
Night,
Thank
Madam
you very
Mayor.
much.
Good
for
night,
your
Madam Mayor.
excellent chairing.
Good night, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you,
Good
Madam
night,
Mayor.
everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam